First of all, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
This has been a big week for us Pennsylvanians who had a big celebration of Groundhog Day this week. And of course, the Punxsutawney Phil saw his shadow. So we're going to have 6 more weeks of winter. His wife, who divorced him and moved to Florida, says he's just a perennial liar, so it never really turns out the way he predicts, but who cares? So we're going to start with a World Cafe, and through the World Cafe, what we're going to do, we're going to break into groups of 4, and in those groups, you're going to talk about something you've been thinking about since our first session. I mean, what stuck out for you in that first session, and sort of what are you thinking about? We're going to have groups of 4. We're going to do 2 groups. We're going to rotate at 5 minutes. So that'll give each of you about a minute to talk about what you did in those groups. And then at the end of 10 minutes, we'll come back together and then we'll talk a little bit about what we found there, and then we'll prepare you for your day today. All right, Avis, you all set to break them out?
Just like, hold on.
Okay.
Okay, so I have like 8 breakout groups.
Yeah, we have what, 36 plus the 3 of us.
Yeah, some of them are 5, but most are 4.
Yep.
And how long are we giving them? Sorry,
We're giving them 5 minutes in each.
5 minutes.
5 minutes, and then they rotate.
Find my phone.
And they get another 5 minutes.
And you see Joshua. Oh, okay, yeah, he can join. Let me know if you need help, John.
It's funny looking out my window. We got about 15 inches of snow, and then it rained so much the last 2 days, it all went away. Now we have a sheet of ice out there. Winter in New England.
Yeah, real winter. My phone died, hold on. The question is like, what is something you have been thinking about, right, since last time?
Right.
Yeah. Just gonna broadcast that. I think like 2 minutes have passed, maybe. I'm sorry, I'm like, my phone died and it's like I cannot get
I think you're good. About 2 more
time.
minutes, Avis.
Yeah.
I see you on your exercise desk, Avis. I've been trying to figure out how to do this on my rowing machine, but I haven't quite figured it out.
No, you can't. Too much. rowing machine.
That'd be too much.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
because you can walk forever, but rowing you can do maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah, I know last week you walked for about 5 hours last week. You must have put in about 80
Well,
miles.
I think that, we are, all of us are migrants, and we
Mhm.
used to like,
Yeah,
we'll go from place to place. We went, over we said
yeah.
green line bridge, green line, what is it called? Like when people migrated, right?
Yeah.
Onto the Americas by foot in like horrible weather. So humans can walk forever.
Well, my desk goes up and down. I can raise it so I can stand about half the time and then sit half the time. So,
Yeah, standing up burns like, I think it's like 50 calories more or something
when you're standing,
per hour.
hmm,
Yeah, and walking, just depending how big you are, but walking is like, for me, maybe like 180 per hour
not very many,
calories.
not very many.
No, but so the bigger you are, the more you lose. Right?
So
And
being,
also the younger you are, the more you lose as you age.
oh, that's true.
Like you need, I was like looking, okay, so when I'm like 80, I will only be able to eat 700 calories.
Is that
Yeah.
true?
Yeah, true.
I'm closing in on 80, so that's not good.
But for many, it's a little bit more, but maybe like 1,000. So
I've got a 77th birthday next week, so I think you could move them.
yeah, I just closed it.
Okay.
It's yeah. And then just recreate rooms. So
Right.
now you give them instructions again. I think that there was another question to build on.
No, there was just one question. So it's a new group, same question.
Okay, so just
Yeah.
like, yeah, they still have to come back in 30 seconds so I can do it again.
Mhm.
So when they're all back, you can give the instructions in 7 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, we probably should have had a second question. Maybe what would they like to accomplish today, or maybe, I don't know. Okay, they're all back.
Hello, welcome back. So we're gonna have like another breakout group.
Okay. And maybe what you can think about in this breakout group is that, okay, what have you gotten from last week that you've been thinking about, and how are you going to build on that for today? What do you expect for today?
Okay, so you're in different groups now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I apologize. I have to open. Something happened.
Well, you got to start kicking them out of this group. There they go.
Yeah, some people have weak connections.
Okay. You have your phone plugged in, Davis, or want me to time it?
Oh yeah, I can put that on. Start, and then
Is this my breakout room?
no, it's not. You were like, I'm gonna put you, let me see.
Well, welcome, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Room 6. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
All right.
Thank you.
What is something you have been thinking about since last session? And what you hope to accomplish today, I guess, or is that what you said?
Right. And then we'll
Or
just
build,
do-
I hope to build on today. This is what you
Okay.
say, but you hope to build on today.
Are you asking that in their breakout rooms?
Oh, yeah, I put it in the chat, but I'm supposed to put it in the broadcast.
That's okay. We'll only get a
Aye.
chance to, we'll only get a chance to talk for a few minutes when we get back about what came out of it. So.
I'm having trouble sometimes copying and pasting. Okay, but that's not working. Okay. Now that took like forever. Yeah, I just look for something.
Can we see what they've been writing, Evis?
Yeah. And you might want to read these, as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, that might be a good way of summarizing.
Mhm.
Okay. Coming up to the 1 minute mark.
Yeah. Should I close it? Because I think that, they still have 1 minute inside, so I'll close it. Let me see if this is for the asset mapping. Looking at the agenda, sorry. Hi. How you doing?
Are people coming back?
Yeah. Do you want me to show the slides that people wrote things on?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Can we take out that breakout room thing, Evis? There we go.
Yeah, I think people should be back now.
Okay, so welcome back, everyone. So we've been writing things down. So there are a lot of things that you've been thinking about. The idea of social change, keeping up with current events, sharing the information that you got from your first session with the public, sharing the course information with people in your community, so you're spreading the word. The whole idea that everyone has something to offer, how we go from one-on-one relationships to taking action, sharing the course with a friend, the ABCD approach versus the social service model, ways of having one-on-ones, how to best use the model in each area of work. And how about a couple of shout outs from people? And maybe quickly we can show the whole gallery, Avis. Can we view everyone, Avis?
This one is like the second slide.
Yeah, but I want the group to talk, so.
Oh,
rather-
okay, view everyone, gotcha.
rather than read more of them. So how about a couple shout outs from people about what you've been thinking about since the first session? Just raise your hand and we'll start talking.
Raise my hand.
Okay. Shahid?
Great. It's good to see you folks. Shahid here from Philadelphia System of Care. Something that our group kind of like shared about in regards to what we've been thinking about since the last session is perspective of community, kind of like balancing being positive with like the reality of things environmentally, socially, economically. And then someone shared recovering. So the last session wasn't as healthy for them as they would have wanted it to be. There was a particular situation in their group where they felt like, they were being blamed for something and it was a misinterpretation of what it is they represented. And this person they're here with their full heart. And so I'm so glad that they did what it took to return. And,
Interesting.
prayerfully they have a different experience if I can help it. And so and I think my feedback was there's a lot dismantling, right? I've been on fire with that, and thinking about what to dismantle. Don't want to be a warrior without a cause, but a warrior all the same. And just really considering what breaks down and what builds up.
Okay, good. Thank you. Anyone else? Gigi, did you had your hand up before?
Yes, sir. Hi, everyone. I live in Savannah, Georgia, and I came here on the invitation of Rise Church. And for me, my personal focus is on dismantling systemic racism. That's bottom line for me, but that's huge. And in a place where there's so much resistance to change and so many opinions on what's needed, it can be difficult to move. Because the reason I say that is because ABCD has actually come to Savannah on a couple of occasions. I can't think of the name of the gentleman who published a book on
Henry Moore.
Yes, Henry Moore. He's been to Savannah many times, and he has given his heart and given examples and got people together, and the fractionalism continues. That's the best way to describe it in my sociology mind. My sociologist mind calls it fractionalism because it's not helping anyone other than who it's helping. So, the power marches on doing whatever. So I would like to be part of the solution, though. So I'm not complaining. I'm just
Gigi, you've taken on a huge issue, but you can do something with ABCD on, sort of not changing the world, but changing it sort of person by person, neighborhood by neighborhood. So
yes,
this is good. All right, one more. And you can just speak up if one more person. Oh, Catherine.
Hey everybody, Catherine from Philadelphia. And so the video that we watched last week, the TED Talk, was really powerful. And so I had the opportunity to share that with a group of county level stakeholders that we meet with monthly.
Hmm.
And so we're in the family and children's behavioral health world. And so really thinking about, when we do assessments, right, when we're learning about a youth and a family, how are we doing it in a full way that really gets a picture of their strengths and their assets, and not just a single story, and the dangers of that. For both our kids and families, and then also our neighborhood councils. Some of the neighborhoods we work in, they have like a reputation of X, right? But can we look at that fuller picture? So it was a great video, and I'm so happy I was able to share that with folks.
Thanks, Catherine. It's funny that you mentioned sharing the video. I teach a class on ethics at Fairfield University, and I showed them the video this past Wednesday as well. So pretty cool. Yeah. And with a bunch of 20-year-olds, college kids, it was quite interesting about how they labeled people and admitted to it, So it was eye-opening. All right. Thank all of you. So Evis, if you could put up the slide on our schedule for today, that'd be great. So you can see this is an overview of our time together for all 4 sessions. You know what we did last week, and today we're really going to be we're going to dig deeper into the assets and starting the whole process toward the asset mapping process. So John's going to talk a little bit about assets in terms of individual gifts and associations. Evis is then going to talk about institutions and physical assets. And then after lunch this afternoon, I'm going to talk about local economics and economic exchanges and talk about culture and stories. And then John will lead us at the end in a whole practice of asset mapping. So that's our day for today. And it's just coming to this whole process is you can go down a couple slides, Evis. Unless I can do it. Nope, I can't do it. Oops, go back a little bit. One more, Evis, 1 or 2 more.
1, 2 more up front.
Go back. Yeah.
Back.
Yeah. There, that's good. So we're coming to this conversation today as individuals. We're each bringing something to the table. We're bringing our histories, our affiliations, the communities we live in. And it's important to speak from our own experiences, to not talk from other people's voices, but to talk from your own. We all have different voices. We all have different ways of understanding. And that lends to the diversity of what makes great communities. We've got the skills to accomplish great things together. I always tell people that we've got all the skill to accomplish just about anything in this room, and we don't go outside this room until we've exhausted the resources of our room, because that's how we build community and that's how we get there. The only other thing I'd like to do before turning this over to John to take, maybe a very brief break, 2 or 3 minutes, and then turn it over to John, is talk a little bit about what we did last week, what we accomplished last week. I think the most important thing as we think about ABCD, it's not just a set of tools, to asset map your community and to identify the gifts and engage people to really build communities, but it's a state of mind. It's a different way of thinking. I can't imagine how long it took me when I first got introduced to the asset philosophy and started going to meetings and tried to get people to move away from needs orientations, just looking at the community from a needs base rather than an asset base. After about 6 months, people said, here comes the asset man, and now, people don't even remember where it started and where it came from. And everybody's doing asset maps and looking at strengths in terms of addressing issues in their community. So it's not just the tools, it's a state of mind, and people need to get into that thinking mode and keep thinking that way in terms of inclusion and things like that. I think the other thing to take away is that this isn't just the asset part of it. We showed you the glass half empty or the glass half full, and the answer is yes. People have needs, people have issues, communities have needs and issues and problems that need to be addressed. And the only way they can be addressed is from the glass half full part of the glass, when we identify people's assets and strengths, and we use those to move on. So I'm hoping you all have a great day as we take a look at this. I'll be back a little bit more this afternoon. Do we want to take a very brief break, John, or are you ready to go?
Yeah, I think that, it's supposed to be like every hour. So we're still only half hour.
Okay, so John, it's all yours.
And yeah, you were going to go through these slides, the ABCD orientation? Bob?
No, I just did a summary of those, Evis, and in terms of what they needed to get, they've got all those slides to get into more of the detail. So.
Yeah, this is basically what we're going to be talking today. So like the 6 assets.
That's right. We'll be getting into each of those in more depth.
Okay, Evis, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I can control the slides, if that's okay. All right. Okay. Hopefully it'll work here. Let's see.
We are like in the individual,
Okay.
right there.
All right. So we talked a little bit about this last Saturday about individual gifts. And I just wanted to start off by saying, I'm a very simple person, but one of my favorite books growing up was Horton Hears a Who. And in that book, anybody's ever read that book, of course, Whoville, the very small people, a person's a person, no matter how small, right? And the idea is that the bigger people doesn't know that Whoville exists, and they're going to inadvertently destroy Whoville because they don't even know they're there and they can't hear them. So the story has it that everyone in Whoville had to get Horton to hear, but Horton couldn't hear, even though he had big ears as an elephant. He couldn't hear him. So everybody in the town, the mayor got everybody in the town to start making noise so that they would be recognized. And still, Horton couldn't hear. And the mayor couldn't figure out what to do, but found out that a little boy was in his room playing and wasn't bothered with making a bunch of noise or helping Whoville. And the mayor went to appeal to the little boy and said, look, we need your help. So they put that little boy all the way up to the top with a trumpet. And as he made a sound, so did everyone else. And finally, Horton heard about Whoville. So these are about individual gifts, that every individual has gifts of some sort. And with that assumption, therefore, everyone is essential in ABCD. And I mentioned last week about the puzzle, right? And how frustrating it is when you start putting a jigsaw puzzle together and there are missing pieces. And when there are missing pieces, of course, you cannot see the big picture. You cannot see the beauty of what you're trying to put together. So as ABCD connectors, which we all are, what we have to ascertain is not only our own gifts to do an assessment inventory, but also help individuals, not do it for them or to them. Remember, we don't do things to people. We don't treat them like objects. We don't do things for people. We don't treat them like recipients. We do things with people. We treat them like resources. So out of that, We want to work with people to find out their individual gifts. And what are those gifts? Now, one of the things that causes problems in trying to do an inventory of individual gifts comes into biases. Biases that we may have, we have to overcome, and biases what other people have for each other. So when you look at the list of these labeled aspects, when we call someone homeless, we think the fact that if they don't have a place where they're staying, therefore they really don't have anything to contribute, and that we are there to give to them because they're homeless. However, is that true? Even though if someone's without a home, does that necessarily mean they don't have any type of gift or contribution? Of course not. Unemployed, poor people, non-English speaking. How often do we run into a situation when someone's maybe their first language is not English, and instead of trying to find other alternative ways to communicate, that person will just speak louder or try. So I mean, in a sense, like they act as if they're deaf versus they're not understanding English. But we have to have an understanding of how do we connect and communicate. Single parents, those who are with addiction, suffering from addictions, former offenders, disabled, elderly, and at-risk youth. We have to overcome our biases in the sense that every individual, we go off with the assumption that every person's a resource, every individual has gifts, no matter what happened, where they are in their life, the status, their connections, and also overcome this idea of labeling people and then stereotyping them and putting them in a box. So as connectors, we have to overcome our own biases to go out to see how do all of us fit into this puzzle, because we all have a piece of that puzzle. So here you'll see the 3 H's of the gifts that we focused on last week. We're going to go a little bit deeper today on this. And the 3 H's, the gifts of the hands, what we can do as far as creating and crafting in a physical sense, the gifts of the head, the ideas, the creativity, the thought, and of course, the gifts of the heart, which comes down to passion, compassion. What do we care about? What do we value? So I asked you all to do kind of a homework assignment, and I hope you remembered it, to try to do a one-on-one conversation with someone in your community, at least 1 or 2 people in your community, to really go over kind of this individual gifts inventory, the gifts of the hands, the gifts of the head, and the gifts of the heart. And so what I'd like to do is probably, Evis, I don't know if this is where we put up the chart where we can, so we can kind of do this together. I don't want to break us into groups here right now.
I'm
But I'd
looking
like for
for
us to come together and share some of these things to give us examples of what you heard or of as far as what you found in your community or in your setting, the gifts of the heart, gifts of the hand, and gifts of the head. And I'll stop sharing if you can, Evis, put that chart up.
Yeah, I'm looking for it.
That one that everybody can type in.
Yeah, so in this one, people are like typing their own gifts. So it's like an inventory, right, of like everyone,
Okay.
basically. So I posted that in the chat. This is not live, so it's not showing live right now. But basically, it's just like putting some of the gifts that you might have. And then from the hands, it's like things that you can do, right? Like the head, some things that you know about. Maybe you really like history. Maybe with the hands, maybe you can play the piano or do construction. And then gifts of the heart is like just like any passion that you have, or empathy, just like something that you might care about. And there's overlapping these things as well, you know. But it's just kind of like a little exercise to get you thinking about the different skills or gifts that you might have.
Evis and John, can I place one
Oh, sorry.
caveat on this gifts of the hand, head, and heart? That it really isn't a gift unless you're willing to share it with someone else. And so, you know, the whole idea of doing this exercise are identifying gifts that can be shared with your community.
Yeah, I guess it would be an asset. It's only a gift if you're willing to give. And I mean, so you can do an inventory of your assets, but really what we're talking about is what are those assets you're willing to give that actually turn into gifts? And we're seeing different things. Cooking, yeah.
Wonderful.
Aid an old person to set in their car. Okay. So writing a play, I see, of course, writing graphic design, the Excel formulas and mathematics. Yes, that's definitely a major gift. That analysis, statistical analysis, and those types of things. Conflict resolution, networking, definitely. Definitely that's ahead. What's that?
Is this in the slides?
Actually, this is, I don't know. This is the magic that Edith is doing as far as we're typing in.
Yeah, it's not in the slides. So this
You have
is
the chart in the slides.
In a sheet.
You do have your chart in the slides that's blank that you can use. But what we're doing here right now, we're just kind of reporting back of our own gifts and also gifts that where you had others to share with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is a separate sheet. So right now there's just a picture in there. So I just posted again the Google Doc where we are going through this, but it's not like in the slides like we have previously done.
Now, keep in mind, also you don't want to necessarily limit yourself in the gifts, because you may think, well, how am I going to give? For example, how can I give networking? Okay, how can I give that? Don't hold yourself back. If that's something you're willing to give, that's part of our asset mapping, is making those connections. So first you start with a building structure of individual gifts, and then we'll go into associations, we'll go into institutions, we'll go through the building blocks. And then later this afternoon, we're going to talk about how we as connectors connect the dots, okay? Looking at those things. So something that you may on the surface saying, I don't have any idea how I'm going to connect this one. This is a gift I'm willing to give, but I don't know how it fits. Don't worry about it. Put it down. And then at that point, you'll see those connections later on. So you can see here, just looking at this alone, if you first ask someone, what are your gifts? What you will probably get most of the time is someone with a deer in the headlight look, like, I really don't have anything. Well, you don't have anything with your hands? No, I'm not, I have a green thumb. I can't really plan anything. I'm not much of a mechanic. You'll get a lot of resistance. And we'll talk about this on the one-on-one conversations. I want to bring up about motivational interviewing and how to draw it out. But just looking at this, what we're doing right now, look how many gifts that are just in this room, in this workshop. And it's going to continue to climb because one feeds off the other. When you read about writing, oh yeah, I can do writing, I can do playwriting, or I can do comedy. or I can do, and then all of a sudden adds to something else and starts prompting ourselves in order to keep populating these gifts. And that's what happens in your community or in your context, in your congregation, whatever group you're working with. You'll start off with this, I don't know if any of us are talented in anything. And that you as an ABCD connector, once you do this exercise, you start drawing them out. This is the discovery. They look at it and say, wow, look at this. Promote hope, compassion and empathy, capacity to receive big feel, to receive big feels, empathy, love and hope of youth. All these types of things that even though you don't see how are these things going to fit yet, that's where we get into asset mapping. Okay. All right. Well, good. So go ahead.
Yeah. Excuse me, my internet is sort of in and out, so I'd like to just say that. But specifically, a couple of weeks ago, my colleague Mario Langoni and I were doing an asset mapping with a group of youth in Garfield Park. And we were, talking about, asking what were the assets. And first person said, well, we have a lot of little children. That's an asset in our community, many, many. And they all raised their hands. They said, yeah, that's what we have. And they all, every one of them took care of little brothers and sisters. And the next time we met, they all brought these little brothers and sisters to show us the asset in their community of these little kids, which never would have occurred to me. And that was quite wonderful.
That is fantastic. And I know you're clergy with me. It reminds me of the story of the feeding of the multitude. And this story about the little children. And the reason for that is that, the feeding of the multitude, the magnitude, in that story, and I'm not going to preach, but I want to talk about the stories because we're getting into stories. So here is Jesus. There's thousands and thousands of people have come. And what happened is that he said, feed the people. And the first reaction to the disciples was, Jesus, we don't have enough food. We don't have enough. We don't have enough money. Send them on their way. He said, no, feed them. So all of a sudden they identified the 2 fish and 5 loaves, right? And they then distributed. And at that time, everybody was full. But what a miracle occurred was not just that off of 2 fish and 5 loaves, everybody was fed, but there were 12 baskets that returned. The scholars believe at that time when people would go out to the desert and listen to rabbis or to whatever, when they would travel, they didn't have McDonald's or they didn't have fast food sheets or convenience stores to stop along the way to get drink and food. They had to carry their own provisions. And what happened was, so when the baskets of the 2 fish and 5 loaves came around, people ate off of that, but also they shared what they brought with everyone else. So you had Jews, Gentiles, you probably had some Republicans, Democrats, independents, you had all kinds of people there, right? And at that moment, people were sharing their gifts, right? And the 12 baskets filled came back. Now, one thing that all 4 stories are in the Gospels, which means it's a very powerful story, and it's written almost exactly alike. Very rare are 4 stories like that in all 4 of the Gospels, or a story like that's in all 4. The only variations in the Gospel of John, and it talks about where did the disciples get the 2 fish and 5 loaves? Well, it talks about this. So one of the disciples brought forward the person that had the 2 fish and 5 loaves that actually fed the multitude, that actually prompted community development, the asset-based community development, right? Where people were fed. And that person was a little boy in the story, the children. And so how often do we overlook children not being assets, right? So I love that story that modern story of it, but definitely looking at our communities that way. So let me go back to our slides of as far as the gifts. So when we are talking with folks, some of the questions or some of the things we can bring up to let them dig deep and to try to discover or rediscover the gifts that they have, right? That you're not going to tell them what gifts they have. You want them to tell you. You want them to discover for themselves. Say, tell me about your favorite places to go. Start there. Okay. I like going to the beach, or, what kind of things do you do on a great day? When you're having a great day, what are things you enjoy doing? What do your friends like about you? What do they say? What do you care about? What makes you happy? What are you or your family already connected to? Is there anything that you have that you always wanted to try but haven't yet? Stretching yourself. What would you like to do? What would you show me around your house? What are you proud of? What are some things that brings you joy? Who do you really enjoy being with? And so we call this the one-on-one conversations or learning conversations, right? And so out of this, we talked about this last week, and we're going to go, I want us to dig a little bit deeper because it is all about active listening. And sometimes we say that we know about active listening, but sometimes I find it even challenging to just listen, okay? So fundamental tools of communicating. As we learned last week, these are 4 aspects that come out of the active listening, the one-on-one conversations. We want to develop deeper relationships with people in our community. So, the idea is not only we're developing deeper relationships with the community, but we also want them to recognize those deep relationships that are already in their community. Like they'll say, oh, this community is so disconnected. Well, tell me about when you had the floods. Today, I'm down in Greenbrier County, where several years ago, there were floods that killed about 23 people here. So if I went around the community and probably, tomorrow's Christian Unity Sunday here, but I'm going to ask the question, tell me what you all did when the floods came, and what did, how did you come together as a community? Discovering once again those deep relationships that did occur during that time. You discover care. You want to see what are some of the things that you're associated with, or the institutions in your community that you're proud of. Also, talk about defining mutual interest. Where are there mutual interest in your community? What's happening here as far as where people are connecting? And then talk about who else should we talk to? Who else should we include? Who else hasn't been included in these conversations? So let me go now. I'm going to go talk a little bit about motivational interviewing. Okay, and I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into this. So in motivational interviewing, this is kind of the rule. RULE stands for resist, understand, listen, and empower. Okay, and you can think about this as your mind frame on the one-on-one conversations that you're having. Okay, the first is to try to resist from the writing reflex. Many times ABCD practitioners, we want to have the desire of fixing things. Like, we're going to go in and fix this community. We're going to go in and fix this church. We're going to fix this situation. Okay. I know clergy, people try to put us in a role of a fixer. Like, they'll come with a problem and they'll say, Father John or Pastor John, can you fix this? And we want to set it right. We want to heal people. We want to prevent harm. We want to promote well-being. We want to do it, right? But part of motivational interviewing and part of being an ABCD practitioner or connector is to pull back on that writing reflex. Just don't launch into it, and recognize the person you are interviewing as a primary resource in finding answers and solutions, that you shouldn't be the walking encyclopedia of how to fix it. And they're going to turn to you. They're going to press you. How are we going to fix this? And what you, as an interviewer or practitioner, is you put it back on them using questions. So keep in mind that no one ever changed another person. No one. We can say the person inspired us to change, that only we can change ourselves. So resist the fixing. The you understand and explore the person's own values and motivations. Part of the interview process is pulling out what they care about, what motivates them, what gets them up in the morning, what connects them, what makes them feel belonging. And then idea there is, when you go deeper in your conversations, wrestle with the discrepancies. You say, on one hand, you say there's people don't care, but then you talk about this garden club association that you're part of, and how they're really trying to beautify the community. Tell me about that. Tell me how that fits. And again, you're looking at the idea of them working through themselves, of change talk, their personal values. They're looking at the glass no longer half empty, but looking at it half full. You're starting to let them discover for themselves for that through your interview process. You listen with empathy, of course, being non-judgmental, accepting, developing trust. This develops self-esteem, even if you disagree with them. The idea there is you're not judging. This is their story. This is their reflection. And you want to ask those questions to go deeper in their reflection. And then through all that, if you do those three, RUL, you'll get to the empower the person, encouraging hope and optimism. Okay, and that the person can change. They will recognize their community can change. They will see that, and they'll start believing it, and they'll be able to achieve it. Also, this comes from research of the different aspects of interviewing, patience, and just as well as can be used for ABCD, is be engaging, and that's the interviewer and the person being interviewed. It's a collaborative, it's a working relationship. It's not just one-way street. So you're working with the person, you're walking with the person, you're asking those questions, you're engaging them. Focusing them and focusing the conversation itself to specific direction about the community, about change the community, about the assets and the gifts of an individual and how that fits in to the overall aspect of community. Evoking their values and motivations, stirring them up, reconnecting to their emotions, their feelings, their desires that they may have once had, but maybe they've given up. There was a story, and I don't know if I've told this, but when I was a kid and I went to the circus, and there was this huge elephant tied to a little rope with a spike. And I thought it was disturbing because this huge elephant being tied, I thought this elephant could just move and just start destroying things. And and I asked the guy, I said, how could you hold that elephant to that little stake with that little rope? It's so big. And he explained to me that when the elephant was very small, that rope and stake, when it tried to pull away and everything, it held it. And so over time, the little elephant gave up, saying, well, I can't escape. So as it got bigger and bigger and bigger, the mindset was still of that little elephant that I can't get away. And that's how it stuck there. We also find that in our lives. We tried something, we give it up. Years later, what we want to do is evoke and say, you know, is that times different? Are you different today than you were then? Of course you are. What is holding you back? And then planning, doing that change talk of interviewing to listen to a person's own solutions, their own gifts and how it fits in. And the last one I'll say with OARS, in your interviewing a one-on-one, you want to use these skills, OARS, okay? Using open-ended questions, not yes or no questions, but open-ended questions. You know, tell me about what gifts that you have, things that you've done in the community in the past, or things you've done in your family. Tell me about these things. And then affirm those statements, right? With strengths. And when I say coachee, that's the person you're interviewing, the interviewee, okay? This is from coaching aspects of recovery coaching, life coaching part. Reflections or reflective listening. You know, reflect back what they're saying in their response. And then summarize. I hear you say this. I understand. Okay. And tell me a little bit about that. You know, tell me, go deeper into this. So that's how we do the one-on-one. Those are kind of tool sets for you to really go into the one-on-one listening. Any questions thus far? Any questions? Go ahead and speak up because I can't see you when I have the slides up.
Are we able to get a copy of those slides as well?
Yes, I'm going to send it to Evis to include in when she sends out the, the slides for that. I'll include that into this packet that you get. Okay. All right. So learning conversations, discover, motivation, act. You know, start with the answer. Remember, resist the fix. Resist the fix. Instead, we want to start with learning conversations. Start with the questions. Less successful, recruit people to implement the answer. I'm going to ask you to do this. More successful is discover what people care about, how they see the situation, and what they have to offer. And then solicit bringing them together. Less successful, look for answers to additional problems. The problem of lack of motivation. More successful is to mobilize your assets to action on people's priorities. And once again, you're not going to know those priorities until you have those one-on-one conversations to know their values. They're not necessarily going to offer it to you. I believe this is my value. They're not going to come to you and lay it out. Those are because you got to build that trust for them to reveal it. And these are some of the things that you can have in your asking your neighbor, okay? And this is in your slides. Something good that happened in your community, the issues and concerns that you want to work on, the skills that you can share, strong relationships with others, associations, institutions, and further contacts you would suggest, other people's names. Okay, we talked about that. Always include that number 5. There's many times we'll finish a conversation and we won't include the other. And it's so essential to always be reaching out to the other. Who else needs to be at the table? Okay, so once you do an inventory of the gifts, both of yourself, of people in your community, at that point, you're going to see overlaps. You're going to see mutual concerns. You're going to see mutual aspects of hands, heart, and head. And those individuals that have those mutual aspects start forming associations. Those are not necessarily 501c3s. They're just people coming together saying, look, we have different gifts here. How do we fit this? How do we start working on this puzzle, right? Let's put our pieces down here and let's see how they connect and what we can do, okay? And then these are groups of 2 or more citizens joined together in a common activity with different passions, care of interest. So they identify a problem and they work together to overcome that problem. And these might be individual groups or individuals that may disagree on everything else in different things, except they do have a commonality for this one issue. Let's start there. Let's start that concern. And how do we work together to address it? And so let it be voluntary. It's not coercive. You're not forcing anyone. Once again, you're treating people not like objects, not like recipients. You're treating them like resources. Let them come forward and empower them to make those contributions. This builds consensus many times. Sometimes there's disagreement, but ultimately people move forward because they have the bigger thing in mind that they agree on. They may disagree on how to get there, but the idea is you want to keep them focused, the eyes on the prize, right? And they thrive on connectors. And that's where we come in as ABC practitioners. We're the connectors. We look for those connections. So here are just some examples of typical neighborhood associations that some of you may already have in your communities and your church groups. I won't go through all of them, but you can see here, PTAs, just different sports aspects, maybe different ministries, feeding ministries, different aspects like that, that are associations. They're not necessarily organizations. And here are some others, mentoring, religious groups, unions, youth groups, YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, although those are organizations, but there might be garden clubs. It might be book reading. I know down at the bookstore, they've started a book club. That's just an association of people coming together and once a month picking a book that they're reading to discuss. Now this one, John McKnight talks about this one, and this is where he used to take his dog walking in the mornings at 6 a.m. around the park. And all of a sudden he noticed other people were walking their dogs at that time too. And he started talking with them and conversing with them about things. And it developed after they were exchanging and talking with each other. They decided, hey, well, why don't we get together and maybe approach the town council to actually, we could raise money and do a dog park, since we're all out here kind of walking ourselves, that maybe this might be something for our community. So they formed a little association and they started organizing. They started making those connections, and some did fundraising, some did connections with the church council, or with the churches. Others went to the town council, and so out of that they formed a group or an association of dog owners, particularly at 6 a.m. Those that broadened to other aspects, and eventually developed a dog park. Okay, and I know this happened in my community as well. Once again, the connector. John McKnight might have been a connector at that point, of course, of bringing people. He might have been the one saying, hey, why don't we get together and talk about this? Maybe he didn't. Maybe he pulled back from the resistance of fixing it and let someone else discover, why don't we come up? Say, hey, that's a great idea. But as ABC, we are connectors, and we want to look at those skill sets within our church, our congregations, within our community, within our families, within our groups, and how do we connect them? Okay. Once again, connector skills as ABC connectors. We're gift center. Each and every one of us are well connected in some way. We all have some connections to something, to each other, to ultimately just, it's a web. And you can see a picture there. Builds trust. Connectors build trust, believes that through these connections, change can occur. And it's a community of welcoming and non-judgmental, being non-judgmental. So here's an exercise. And Eva's, how are we on our time?
Yeah,
we
I
okay?
mean, yeah,
Am
we
I
can,
over?
this is exercise, it's an individual exercise, so you have to make a copy of the document. You should able to see it in the slide where it says make a copy of the document here, and I will post it also on the chat. So again, there's only one sheet in there, so that's why you have to make a copy and then just yeah, be able to write which associations you're part of.
Yeah, and I'd like to see which group has the most. So think hard. Think about your connection to the Boys and Girls Club or your church organizations and your Rotary, the civic, different groups, different associations. Maybe you have a supper club that people come together once a month and at each other's house to have supper to discuss just more social connections. But think about this and list as many as you can in your group, total them up. And then when we come back, and we're only going to have what, Eve, it's about 5 minutes. So we're going to work pretty fast.
Yeah, and this is an individual group, so they're doing it on their own.
Okay, so they don't need to do it now?
No, they need to do it now, yeah, but we will have like, a few minutes to do the exercise. Maybe let's say 3 minutes, but it's on your own. So again, like associations are groups of residents coming together, right? Residents that you come up because you care about something. Nobody's forcing you, so it's by choice. You make decisions by consensus, and it thrives in connectors. So it's like just anything that John already said of like what might be associations. Many associations don't even have names, so just put like, I go for hiking walks with my friend Lisa and Mary, and that's your association. So it could be anything that meets those like 5 C criteria. So again, just a few minutes. I'll post it in a minute. Try to find it.
Jonathan, go ahead.
Yeah, when I click on the document, it looks like we're linked together. So it looks like other people are typing in.
Right. So you have to make a copy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I clicked where it said make a copy, and then it brought us all together when I did try to do it. So I'll see if I can figure out another way. But
gotcha. Yeah. The other thing that you can do is like, grab a paper, just like that you have, and then just write a few things.
This technique here, some of you all may be familiar with this. You'll see the circle. It's also, we do this in asset mapping as well. One of the things, it's a technique called mind mapping. It's I think Benson actually created it years ago, but it's kind of a mind mapping type thing. So you can see the connections to you and then your different associations, and then your associations are connected to other associations, and you'll see a network that goes out. It's almost infinite.
Can you resend the link? Like I keep hitting and I keep getting that chart thing.
Yeah, that's the link.
Yeah, but when I click the chart thing, it just keeps going down and down to more and more charts. Like where you can put your name and the first activity we did.
I just posted the link. Try that one and see if that one works. Just right now.
Thank you.
And the idea is that you will make a copy because there's only one. To make a copy, you go to, let me just show that. And we'll have a few more minutes. So here's the link. To make a copy, you just do make a copy. And then if you wanted to, let's say that you already make a copy. So you make a copy, and this copy associations. This is like mine, I guess. So I only can do anything here. And then you can, when you click on it, there's like a drawing tool, and you can put here, whatever as I said, just example walks with Lisa and Mary on Saturdays. That's my association, or anything else that you could think about. Just groups that you're part of, things like that, and you can save and close. But this is my own copy, as I said before.
Jonathan, you have your hand up again. Was that from the last time, or you have?
Yeah, I don't think I put it down. Sorry.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Yeah, the other thing you can do, I see that Benita put her name here, so maybe, you can say Evie's part of, like, as I said, walking group, and we can all share this way. I couldn't think of like a better way to do this. I will stop sharing here.
So let's work on that just for a few minutes. Once you do, and again, this is what you can do, you're doing for yourself, but this is also a tool for you to use in your one-on-one conversations. After you do the gift inventory, then you can start working on association inventories. It's amazing when people start seeing all the different things they're involved in. You think that maybe you're not, but band, going to the band, taking your children to band camp, or after school activities, football boosters, the cheerleading squad. I mean, it's just all of a sudden these associations start popping up of your connection to them. And maybe you didn't officially join them, you're just kind of like coming together, because an organization you join, associations you congregate, you connect. And we'll get into institutions here in a minute. Evis will talk about that.
Yeah, and one of the nice things of like also mapping associations is that, again, sometimes you think that you're part of just a few because they have a name, but there's a lot of like associations that do not have a name, but again, it's like groups of people that you come together because you care about particular cause. And as John was saying, you can find like connections. Like if you, again, you all care about something, maybe there's connections in organizations, so you can see what you have in common. And I think that, when thinking about institutions, which I will talk about it just later, and we are kind of close to our time here, you can also think about having similar missions and then people that you can partner with. And another point of that is like, if you all were going to make an event, a community event, you all can put like a map of all your associations, and it's probably a lot of people that we are associated with, thinking about fundraising, thinking about how we can mobilize all these associations that we're part of. So I think that, yeah, the people should have, as of right now, listed some. So I don't know if, like, John, you wanted to hear a little bit about that, or?
Yeah, so just to finish up on this, once they come together, your associations, so people come together with their gifts, they associate, they connect, they start working on something in common. And that's where the mobilization occurs. They're moving to develop an area for walking their dogs, where maybe it's safe, where it's just whatever it is, whatever they're trying to accomplish, they come together and they mobilize. Then once these associations are identified, then you can see the power of associations occur. And what you'll see here is you'll see an example of association assets. So think of it, once again, we have assets, and what we're willing to share are gifts. We do an inventory. then when we come together, there's a synergism that occurs, that when we bring our gifts together, it's like it multiplies, not just the sum, but there's a synergism that occurs. And therefore we have assets of, okay, so you'll see some of them with associations often unrecognized, the effective in action. You amplify the gifts, the capacity building. One gift builds on another and magnifies it. Builds leadership, relationship building, employment leads, help people with connections to employment and jobs. We can reach large numbers of people because of one association is partnering with another association and another association. It develops kind of a local knowledge or knowledge bank of what's happening and, kind of information flowing back and forth, and also can be more responsive. So like, I'm not able to join tomorrow at this meeting, but Bob is. But by being associated, Bob keeps me connected and tells me what's going on. And the next time I can join in, and maybe Bob can't, but we just keep handing that baton back and forth and keep moving forward. Those what association's about. I'm thinking of the Olympics, of course, there's Winter Olympics now, but the baton, the relay races, right? They're not running the whole race. One does a stretch and they hand the baton off, and the other one runs, hands the baton off. Association gives you that flexibility. Or if you want to look at a sports analogy, in basketball, they rotate players in and out to give them time to, catch their breath, and they're always playing the game. The game's moving, and you're coming in, you're coming out. Associations allows that to happen. So then once you're associated, sometimes, many times, people say, you know what, we ought to have a more formal structure. Constitution, bylaws, start working there. And that gets us into institutions. And I will now turn that over to Evis to talk about the third asset of ABCD called institutions.
Yeah. All right. And just kind of like as a summary, right? So this is kind of what we did, just like talking about the individual and the gifts of individuals. And was John talked about, and you did like that exercise of like, what were the gifts of the hand, heart, and head. And then we were looking at associations. And so in these three like icons that we always use, they are actually like for explaining community, also like how some of these operate, right? So you have like associations that are being the same, individual with a gift, but then all of them come together. And in an association, there's not like a particular hierarchy, right? So maybe there's a group of the leader, right? Maybe you say that Anna is the one that kinds of organizes, but anyone can contribute, and there's not like a clear hierarchy. So it's like most people come together, and again, they might say, how about we do this, or how about we do that? And they come together because of care and make decisions, and they thrive on connectors. So it's really about people trying to invite you into the circle. Like, how about, you join us to do this, or join us to do that. So it's kind of like a loose type of structure. And also like associations, as John was saying, they're like, they are very flexible, right? Because like maybe they don't have money for a particular program, but they, figure out how to do it through like mobilizing people's gifts. So there's, and they might connect with institutions or other associations in order to accomplish their goals. I do a lot of work in like disaster response and emergency. And institutions, which is what I am going to talk about, they tend to be very slow moving. So to have like response like from FEMA, for instance, that is a institution, sometimes it's kind of like delayed as compared to people on the ground, which are like local organizations and just people helping neighbors. So you're more likely to be helping a situation of a disaster by a neighbor than by organizations. So nonprofits might come later, and even like organizations like FEMA or like other large, governments, they take just even longer. So this is kind of like why it's so important to also mobilize and think about associations, because there are the first ones to respond in many situations of people are having in communities. So the institutions, when we think about, they have the circle of associations, it's kind of loose, people come, people go, and so on. You might say, similarly with like unemployment, right? But this is kind of more like a way of explaining it. So institutions might have like a clear, people have this role, right? And you might say, well, that's not part of my job. That's like somebody else's job, and so on. So this is kind of like where we're trying to like compare and contrast that again. So there's like a mechanism of like making decisions that might be different than based on consensus, even though like more and more, obviously people are attracted to work for companies and organizations that people have more opportunity for decision making and so on. But again, this is kind of like a conceptual tool, if that make sense, like as opposed to get into discussions of like this or that. But just for conceptualization purposes, again, like institutions might be like organizations. Just think about schools and libraries, parks, nonprofits. You might also, and Bob is going to talk later about local economy and exchange, but also we might include here businesses as part of local institutions. And the point is that institutions do like, again, this like service delivery, and they do it very efficiently, right? So they have dedicated a lot of time to improve efficiency and so on, while like community action is like more flexible, but also it might have like some complexities there as well. But we might have like just key here like a comparison. So in institutions, you have a professional, people get paid for this. So when we said the associations is like citizens, and by citizens we mean people who belong to the city. We are not saying that a person is like documented or undocumented. So that's like kind of very clear, the way that we talked about citizens, and the way that we conceptualize that is like with the 5 C's, right? So citizen care, that's kind of like why we have that word, and also it's kind of appropriation of an old word of what actually meant, which is like people belong to a city and they're protected by a city before like states were created, right? This is kind of like the way that we live, like in tribes, towns, and then cities. And then the idea is like, service delivery institutions are more like top down, while like community action associations are more like demographic. The service delivery is very much like focus on need, because you're trying to say, what is the gap that I'm going to fulfill here, right? Because you're also trying to distinguish yourself from other service delivery. And for that, funders have to see that you are fulfilling something. So it's like very driven by the focus on needs. And what we're saying is it doesn't have to be. It can focus on assets. It can recognize needs, but how to focus on gifts as well. But obviously associations are very much like focused on the gifts, because it has to mobilize those gifts. People are not getting paid like in institutions to do this, or if they do, again, they do a lot of like labor out of love. So sometimes we might say, what is a church? If a church, like maybe 3 people are getting paid, but it's mostly members in the church doing the work that it needs to be done, right? And you might have that also with a lot of collectives or like community organizations. So what I'm trying to say is like, we are breaking this down in this form, but we might find a lot of like examples that might not conform to this. But the point being is that, with the relationship with associations or people that are inside of associations is more like reciprocal. So it's kind of like based on like this like gift giving while the other one is more like, I have a job and this is what I'm trying to do. And it's kind of holistic for associations, because it's more like people are kind of like depending on each other in a community, while like for service delivery might be like, this is what I do, this is my mission, this is my vision, and I'm getting funded for this and I cannot do this other thing. Again, just kind of like depends on money, while the other one might be relationships. And this is like a quote that comes from John Maynard this is a book also he wrote with like Peter Block, that is called The Careless Society. And it just basically, this quote, he says that that the thing is that service systems, right, and institutions, they cannot care. Like, care is something that only people can do. So you can have people in an institution that do care, right? That's what they're there doing, this job. But the institution itself, it cannot care. The institution is about efficiency. It's about like providing this service. It's about managing. It's about organizing, administering. It's something that, if we might think about it in a commodified type of way, and it cannot produce care, you have to instill care within the people that are there. And it's always a fight, right? Because like we have to always go back to what are our goals in an institution, and just kind of have people care and energize people. But that's like something, again, that we're trying to build. Institutions themselves don't do that. So now we're going to do like a quick exercise that is about what are the gifts that institutions can offer to the community. And so we have like this treasure chest, and I'm going to stop sharing here. Oh, I did stop sharing because I do have this like treasure box here. So you're going to tell me what your institution, what I might find inside of here, what your institution can offer to communities. And just like to give you an example, here I have like a globe. So in this globe, we might represent resources. Institutions, your institution has resources that it offers to residents and to the community. And you can also use the chat or verbalize, just mute yourself to verbalize what institutions can offer to communities.
Grant writing support.
Grant writing, yeah. So I have like here like some money that they can offer that. You have like social media outreach. I don't know, I'm just gonna represent it with this little M&M cards. They have been a lot of social media lately. I have like that, yeah, the organization, yeah, itself, some capacity. So it might be, like some staff has some capacity to offer that it can again use. There's the name and reputation. So again,
needing a space.
Yeah. So we have like here like a little building and space that you can offer. You can offer some hope and devotion. I don't know, I have this like football thing, but sometimes we want our football teams to win and have like some hope for that. Knowledge, right? Some brains, some like research as well. So we have here some kind of like papers and things. So it has like, being a fiscal sponsor, and again with like managing the money and offering like compliance support for associations. So yeah, I think that there's some training and education as well. Maybe we have like this little doll. It's someone offering the training. It has tons of volunteers. So maybe there's some volunteers in here, these little soldiers. So yeah, so there's a lot of things that we can offer. programs, and there's like a whole bunch of, again, award-winning programs, whatever it is. So we can offer all those things, right? To we have lots of gifts. Like, I mean, by me saying I'm just like talking mostly about the what your institution can offer to community groups. So let me just go back to the slides. I'm having like a little trouble finding these. Just hold on. All right, I think I've found them. Thank you so much for playing with me in this exercise. And this is just kind of like an example of like my institution. So again, we have like in the University of Utah, some gifts, as we said, like having a space, supporting residents. So I teach a class that is for residents that speak Spanish, and they're trying to start. Many of them come in associations, and they're trying to start the institutions, or most of them actually stay as associations, but we give them like mini grants, like $1,000, $2,000 for their project. So basically I offer technical assistance of like, this is my mission, the vision, this is like what I'm trying to address, this is how we do asset mapping, and this is how we connect with other institutions or with governments, and so on. So that's again like things that we can do, put some more staff, some more money, some more resources to support community groups. And these are just some questions that we can ask, right? So we can use our buildings, we can purchase goods and services locally. So that's something like Bob is going to talk about, right? So making sure that those monies, that the money stays in the community, and just thinking about it in a holistic way. We can hire people from the community to working on institutions. So again, this is just questions that we can ask. So the important thing is that in a way, institutions are key to community partnerships, and that we have to be moving away from this like silo thinking of like, this is kind of what we are doing, and not looking into other organizations are doing, and other associations are doing, and trying to like support that work. And in that way, moving from the top down to be more really community driven, and moving from thinking about starting from needs to actually starting with strengths. So we can think about like, how can community workers help? And that is like many of us, right? So this is just like some, I guess they're not 10 commandments, but they're like 8 of them. So it's just like, do no harm, right? So this is kind of like the oath that we can take as community workers, like don't distract the community from its own priorities. Don't force the community into institutional silos. Don't take people's time without showing results. Don't think of the community solely as people and places with needs. Don't do for people what they can do for themselves. Don't make the community dependent on you. Funding or external sources. Don't start anything that you cannot kill. And this is kind of like a question also of sustainability as well. And don't treat nonprofit organizations as the surrogate for community. And don't use liability, safety, or red tape as automatic excuse to say no to community initiatives. And then, things that we can do also is like, get out of your cubicle and just into the community. Help the community to discover its resources and the power that they have. Just share tools that enable the community to take the lead, and assist community associations to network with one another. Help people to find and share the gifts. Pay attention to the segments of the community that are being excluded and find ways to engage them. Just raise objection when you encounter discrimination or marginalization. Look for potential leaders and like help them to develop their capacity, and share stories of the community success, so great things that people are doing and their accomplishments. Recognition and celebration is very important, and always practice what you preach, right? By being active in the community. So what we are going to do is just like kind of break into some groups. So I'm going to just make some groups and put like, and this one you can go to your own, to whatever you want. So if it's a school, university, faith-based, nonprofit, and government. So I will not going to assign you, you will find your own, and you will have like to ask, like, what could you and your institution start doing to best partner with communities. So we'll do this for just a few minutes. Let's just have some breakout rooms, and I'm going to recreate and also let participants choose a room, and I'm going to just create yeah, some just like 8 groups, I guess. So I'm going just to rename here. So I'm gonna put like church, that's the room 1, church, there's another one for church, nonprofit, another one in there, nonprofit, and then I'm gonna make one for university. I don't know if there's enough for this, but let's have another one in there. And then I'm gonna make another one for government and government. And then you should be able to go into the bottom and then see the join whatever room you want to join in there. And you will have just like, so it's not a lot of time. It's just like 5 minutes to just talk about what your institution can do to support the community. Let me know if you need help, because I can also move you to any group that you want, of the ones that we said. We have government, university.
I can't find where I need to select the group.
Okay, so.
Me either. I can't find it either.
Normally I'm good with these
All
things.
right, so what you want?
I found you. I'm sorry, I got it.
Where you want to go, Alisa?
If you could just throw me into government, that'd be awesome.
Government.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I see it.
Anyone else that needs help? And I'm going to move.
If you could put me in nonprofit.
Yeah, just hold on. I was like trying to move somewhere else. It's not working. Is it Darlene?
Yeah. Or
non-profit.
Or government.
Non-profit. I put you in non-profit. I don't know if there's.
Okay, thank you.
There's a lot of people in some of these. Like some rooms are.
Me too. They put me in university. Yes, all right. I'll just go there.
Okay. This is kind of complicated. Okay, and I didn't give them that much time, but yeah. So where should I put you, Maria? Or
okay,
Sheila?
I'll go anywhere.
Sheila will go anywhere. I'll put you with one that has less people. Church, is that okay?
Perfect.
Yeah, and then Maria.
Yeah, church or institution will go. Either of them.
The church?
Or school or institution. Or like a university.
University. Patricia? Yeah, Patricia, I don't know if where you like to go. Non-profit. There's like tons of people in one of the non-profits. Tons of people in university. There's only 3 people in government. And church is not that big. It's like 5 people. I'm gonna make this a copy of this. Yeah. We are like a little time. We'll try to cut on the other one.
Where, Patricia, which group are you part of, or do we know?
I put her in a nonprofit, yeah.
Oh, nonprofit, okay.
I think maybe she maybe she stepped up for a minute. So physical assets, so it's supposed to be 10:45. So that's
How are we
only
with
15
time?
minutes.
Yeah,
we're late. We're very late. You were early with Bob, but then
Bob
yeah.
caught us up, and then I blew, and then I took all of his time plus mine. And
it's hard to talk about all these things, you know.
I put those other slides in the chat box. Did you see that?
No.
I posted it earlier.
Okay. Yeah, but these are PDFs. So do you have like slides? Because I cannot add a PDF. I guess I can add the.
Let me try it.
Because I think you were using PowerPoint. Okay, so it's time. Close rooms. That's like very fast. It's like 5 minutes. Hello.
Hello. Sorry, I had a funeral this morning, so I'm just picking it up, jumping in right.
Yeah. I did get your email.
So I'll close her down and join back when you all join up.
Yeah, it should be 15 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then I think after this we'll go for lunch.
There's never enough time, David. It's never enough time.
Never.
Yeah, plus the groups were very big. So there was like 2 groups for nonprofits, but majority were in one place, and the university the same. So those groups were gigantic. So for our next one that we'll do, that it will be kind of also thinking about asset mapping. We'll do like smaller groups, because I think that you know helps a lot. Because again, it's just like not enough time and a lot of people. All right, so now I just like to hear, maybe we have like that group on the church. This is like some or maybe we can all together, because it seems that you know there's many things that we can offer, but I'm wondering, yeah, so maybe in the church, these are like a few things that you can say about some of the assets you may offer.
Yeah, we talked about a few different things. One was space. A lot of churches have space that's not being used, especially throughout the week, and to utilize that resource of space. We talked about being a place that is a place of trust, coming into like as a connector in a community. Being a church oftentimes can get you enough trust to start to get people to work together that might not otherwise. And we also hit on the church, although oftentimes failing at this mission, is supposed to be a place of renewed perspective that challenges its leaders to approach things with the heart and love of Christ in a self-sacrificial way, rather than the myriad of other ways that we try to tackle problems.
Yeah, and that's like very unique to the churches.
That was well put. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's hear now from the non-profits. And you can repeat some of the same things or say, you know, this unique thing that you talked about.
So I'll go because I didn't get a chance to talk in the nonprofit room.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think I pretty much heard some of the similar things. And for me, in the nonprofit area where we started in one community, one area, being able to expand the programs as not just one apartment complex or one subdivision, but make it abroad in Savannah. So I don't know if, like, you know, even in the room where we just left, like connecting with some of those nonprofits that already have things that I can bring into a hub, right? Because I don't think that my nonprofit professed to say that we have all the answers. We just want to connect the people to the answers, to the resources. So bridging gaps. So that's kind of what, if I answered the question right, I hope so.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, and you were in a very large group, so I imagine yes, you didn't get a chance. And then, but we also had another nonprofit group, and this one is like Alejandra, Amber, Daniel, Elizabeth. Do you want to like say anything same or unique about what your institutions can offer to communities?
I can hop in. We talked about like the networking too, but I mentioned this when we were throwing things in the chat earlier. But like, for example, Habitat for Humanity, one of the reasons I joined them was their reputation. Even though they are like a faith-based organization, I'm personally atheist, but because of the work that they do and the way that they do it, I was immediately like drawn to it. So I think just having your organization, you know, just kind of be able to adapt and be open to different people is really helpful.
Excellent. And then we had two more groups, so university and then government. The university group was pretty large.
I don't want to share everything because I talked a lot during our group meeting, but I think something that really stood out was like doing internally what we hope to do in the community. So really stressing like the ideas of equality and of like I guess representation issues with gender and race, and I think also age is an issue. And so making sure that all of those things that we hope to see in our community are done internally. And then also the issue of like institutional contracting of food services, that we hope to see that sort of broken down, and instead really using the resources in the community that we live and work in, so that we get like a local flavor and also keep the money local.
Excellent. And I think that Tabata, were you trying to mute yourself?
No, but I'll go ahead and speak up also. I come from a different side of universities, so I'm in the community extension services part of it. So we are, we're literally there to serve our communities. That's our whole goal. And, you know, we talked a lot about providing location. We have auditorium space for our groups, our communities to use at any time. But also we provide a lot of research. We have an economist as part of our division, and the whole, you know, his whole role is to provide research for workforce, community, economic development, agriculture development. And then, you know, we provide conferences like this. So to help these tiny towns in Arkansas learn how to better, how they can build from inside out as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And then we have like the government group, and this was a small one, so maybe I will go to say something.
Hello. It was myself, Alyssa, and Lamar in the government group. And so we represented, so our systems like Department of Transportation and Department of Behavioral Health. And I think the interesting thing is in kind of sharing our stories, we heard some of the similarities of where we want to move and where we want to change to more effectively partner with the community. And a lot of it was around our internal culture, changing hearts and minds to really form authentic partnerships with the communities rather than tokenism, rather than, in kind of a removed sense, but really getting out and into the community. So we loved the do not harm list. We're definitely taking that back. So thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you all for sharing. So again, we are going quickly through these exercises, but then later John is going to do like an asset mapping that it will be with a group that you came with or with like an affinity group. So you will have definitely more time to map what are your assets. And then now we are going to be talking about the physical assets. And I have a new a slideshow here because like that one, it was too big to open inside of the Google Docs. So this one is like B, session 2B, and it's already over there. So just kind of like join me here on this one to talk about physical assets. So again, we talked about the guy, right, or the lady in the middle, the individual with their gifts, and they might be connected to all kinds of associations. You have like those little circles and everybody's like sharing gifts, but then those associations might be connected to institutions, which are these like little triangles. And some of them might be like the government, for profits or nonprofits. And this is kind of like our asset map so far, right? And then we're going to be adding the physical space. So this like where this is located. And in asset-based community development, we usually operate at the neighborhood level because that's like kind of like the scale that you can better connect with associations, nonprofits, and institutions and have like, something going. That is not to say that we cannot do things like online, especially like through, we might talk about, globalization and all kinds of things that allow us to connect with other spaces. But that is to say, like, if you do like asset mapping and all that, it tends to be concentrated in physical space and in the neighborhood at a manageable scale. So what are things that are in the built environment that we can use? Where there's like land, open space, vacant lots, we can see as something obviously that we can use. Trees, plants, buildings, walls, plazas, infrastructure, waterways, so everything really that it is in the physical space. So this is like a neighborhood. I'm just going to ask you if you can tell me what are some of the assets that you see here, meaning things that we can use if we wanted to do something, or what are good things going on in here in this neighborhood.
The buildings that are standing there now.
Yeah, there's like buildings, and in those buildings it seems like what's going on, like there's what in those buildings right now?
Some sort of business.
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
There's housing going on.
There's housing, yeah, lots of housing, apartments.
Yeah, and you got small businesses, like you got their little corner poppy store.
Yeah,
and you got a business over there that's closed, so you got like small businesses.
Yeah, there's several small businesses. What else? All right, so
vacant lot.
There's a vacant lot, yeah, to the right, so it's kind of the one that it has like some, fence in there.
Signage.
They got messed up
signage.
Yeah, There's signage, which means, you know, there's like some kind of identity. There's some
Some kind of
families there,
pride. Yeah, some kind of pride they have.
some kind of pride in that neighborhood. Yeah.
There's a
They got storefronts.
Storefronts. Mhm.
Yeah, the ground is messed up. So, I mean, they need to be fixed.
Okay, right. So you're talking about the sidewalk, but look at that sidewalk. It's gigantic. It could, you know, right now it doesn't comply with ADA, right? Because you cannot really go through a wheelchair there. But you know, there's something going on. Like you could do something.
there's a blank wall where community
wall.
members could put a mural together.
Oh yeah, but walls are definitely assets. Is there anything else?
Yeah, well, that whole area where the vacant lot is, it can be converted to utilize for a lot of different things, community garden. Then that way the initiative might be in place then to repair the sidewalk. So, you know,
Yeah,
like I said,
absolutely.
Mural.
The graffiti.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in an urban place, right? In the city. Maybe there's like bus transit, you know, routes here. There's employment. So there's probably all kinds of stuff. Obviously, like, go ahead.
No, the trees, they don't look like they're too healthy. That can be an initiative too for beautification of the at some greenery.
Yeah, right. Well, great. So I think that you have identified a lot of the assets in this community, and this community is like is in next to like Rockers, and it's an African American neighborhood. So a lot of actually students do like work there, and it's a place again that we might consider like low income. So the question is like, again, how we're thinking about all these assets and how we can utilize it. So this is kind of like a project like from the university. They were not thinking about awesome wall murals, but that was definitely an opportunity there. So adding, you know, some landscaping and greenery, doing something with that vacant lot. Maybe, you know, there's it seems maybe there's a park right now, but maybe there's like community gardens that we can do that, but definitely like fix the sidewalk. They could have been like businesses that they put, you know, kind of like restaurant, just kind of like outside, you know, tables, and then maybe bringing some economic vitality there. But those like streets were pretty wide. So you could have like even like some protected parking potentially, which is not there, but it has like a bike path. And this project was mostly thinking about, you know, bike paths and different modalities of like walking, biking, and having cars and transit. But again, just kind of like, what I like is you guys were thinking about, again, just the assets that are there, because all communities already have tons of things that we can build on. So I'm an urban planner. So this is kind of like some of the things that we doing in class, just thinking about, you know, like there's a lot of like light rails that now are not active. So being transforming those into like trails or like places that are commercial corridors. So this is a place where there's a lot of industry in kind of like low income neighborhood, majority immigrants, and also there's a lot of Latinos. But there's a lot of businesses and a lot of things going on. Just thinking about some daylighting, which is like, I don't know if you guys know, but in a lot of like cities, the rivers that passed there were like buried because they were seen as like hazards. So it says daylighting is this initiative of like bringing the rivers back out. So just thinking about envisioning, right, like what we can do in the community, calling attention to those like assets that might be invisible. And later on, you can watch, you know, more of the initiatives that, you know, students do. But something I do a lot is trying to highlight what are the assets. Like there's this like awesome trail that is like in the back of like senior center and also like recreational center, but people might not know that it's there. So maybe like adding something that my students have been doing is like adding signage to highlight what are the assets. So a lot of the asset mass mapping, if it's a space, kind of like connecting people from this place or to that place or the community, particularly with like many people are like immigrants. I mean, there's a lot of new immigrants, again, new to the community, new to these assets. So how we can highlight that, how we can have like bilingual signage. Another thing is like murals are very, oh, like, there's a little bit of echo there. Hold on. Sorry, I need to Yeah, maybe mute here. My apologies here. Okay, this let me see if I can find this again. Okay, let's just like go back in there. Yeah, so like just thinking about murals, there is like something inexpensive, but it can bring like community placemaking. So kind of like saying, you know, this is a place, we care about that place, like you saw before with like those like signage of the family. Just naming things is also very important, or even recognizing the culture of that particular space, like kind of like changing the name of the streets to like places that are like important for people, or people that are important for other people in the community, but also anything that it might increase like, you know, pedestrian activity and just like beautify a space. They just kind of tell you stories. So a lot of the things that we do are like placemaking. So this community didn't have like a sign of like, this is called Jordan Meadows as a neighborhood. So we have like all these like kids like from the apartments next door joining my students and doing like a paint by color basically, and just painting, you know, this is Jordan Meadows. And it was like kids mobilizing their assets, because we started with just, you know, one kid walking by, because it was like my students had invited people in the community and put flyers, but one of them came and then they brought all their friends. We had like tons of fun. And there might be like other examples. There's have been a lot of like community school closures in Chicago, for instance. So there have been open bids for community groups doing something with those schools. And sometimes, you know, there's things that we don't want, like school closures, right? So we may even fight against that. But then when once a school is closed, then what we do about it? And I think that that's kind of like some of the questions that we have to do, like how we transform like liabilities in space, that a place that could be vacant into something that it could be productive, thinking about housing, for instance. And you can look more about this example of like a community space for that building. There's a lot of empty schools, because like there have been the population of kids, the schools that have capacity for 1,000 kids, and now there's 700. So how we can house like some of our community initiatives. That's some of the things that I have been working on with like community as campus in Chicago. So that I guess that, you know, the important thing is that now we have added this like other physical asset that is like so important. So we are going to go for a break for a half hour, but I just have like a little homework here that's for you to paste a picture of like a visible treasure.
Avis, I might suggest to people, I'm going to talk about them a little bit later, but the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative in Boston, if you go to their website, dsnn.org, has the most wonderful photo gallery about how they redid a neighborhood. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, and if you can post that in the chat, that'll be great. I see like some newsletters here as well. These ones are very beautiful, lots of art. I was wondering where this mural is, the one on the top.
So I actually posted that one. That's in South Omaha, Nebraska. It is a predominantly immigrant community from Mexico and Central America. And so, yeah, that since a lot of people love to like paint, and I know there was like a problem with like graffiti back then, but I think that they used that talent to do murals. And I know like there was even a nearby high school that's a performing arts high school that actually helped with this project as well.
Yeah, it's like absolutely wonderful. and it's inexpensive to do these things. And even some communities have added some graffiti walls, right, for just free expression as well. And we can see the theme of like different murals, and like, I don't know if anyone wants to share about some of the pictures that they posted here. I'm also curious a bit about this building project.
Is that Robin Williams?
Yeah, that's so I live in Logan Square in Chicago, and that's one of the murals. It's kind of nice in this neighborhood because it's become rapidly gentrified, but something that's really kind of stuck around, and I think actually gotten more prevalent in that process is the street art. And so it still has retained some of its character. And so it's something that I really miss about like before the pandemic, is just going on long walks and, you know, from the train and seeing all of the different murals in the neighborhood.
Very beautiful. And I don't know if anyone wants to share about this one. The one in the middle, there's a lot of things going on in there.
So I posted the two pictures on the right. So the picture there in the middle, you know, we talked about, you know, hidden opportunities, the buried treasures. There is, it's called El Paso Avenue, and it runs from Arkansas Tech University into downtown Russellville. And they have done a lot of work to make that a complete street. It has the bike trails, it has the great sidewalks, but there's still not a lot going on. So we did a pop-up event one day. It's kind of hard to tell, but you know, we set up street games, which you can see. We had croquet and hopscotch and stuff like that drawn on the sidewalks. But we also brought in like a mobile bank that came in. You can kind of see there in the background. We had a dog park set up over, that's what's across the street. It's really hard to tell what it is, but we had set up a makeshift dog park, and actually we now do have a dog park in Russellville. It's not on El Paso Avenue, but that was one of the things that came out of it. But it was an information gathering session essentially, but it was a whole bunch of fun. But then also the one on the far right, we do a farm to fork dinner. We did 4 before the pandemic started, and we haven't done that yet, but it is on the agenda to start again. We're a very agri heavy area, and so we have a culinary school in the area. And so the chef from the culinary school, along with some of her students, prepared dinner from locally sourced ingredients, everything from locally grown rice to, you know, locally grown and processed meats and vegetables. And we just invited the community to come out to downtown Russellville and have a great dinner with us.
Wonderful. Yeah, I love all these. Also curious about this one.
I posted it because one thing I say about the city of Philadelphia, with a lot of the stuff that's going on, we do with things happen, we come together. Like for example, with COVID stuff was going on, and they were doing the riots and stealing and all that, but people got together to make sure seniors get their medicine and stuff like that. Well, this is like a sore spot in our city. It's like 36 years ago when the mayor had bombed these squatters. He literally like told them to drop bombs on them. And I just showed these pictures to show how the community can come together as one to, you know, try to help and rectify the situation that was wrong. And that's something that the city of Philadelphia is known for. So they say we know for brotherly love, but I feel as though we know for sisterly love too. So the one picture on the right, you got the worker here after the effect of the bomb. He there to try to help, you know, figure out where you will start working at. And there was an article I found, and then you got the pictures of the people that's upset. You got the policemen and the community members right here together, upset that this is really like happening. And they thinking like, what can we do to help this situation? So that's why I post on pictures.
Yeah.
To give you an idea with Philadelphia, living in Philadelphia is like.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. We have like more in here.
These are photos from my very first Ramps and Rails project. We did a lot on this property, but before sorry about my puppy. There were blackberry bushes all in front of the house. The roof was covered in moss. So we had 2 volunteers help me, and I went on the roof for the first time, and that's why I'm all excited, because I didn't die. And so we scrubbed all the moss off the roof, and then the second picture is actually the homeowner. And he came out and he climbed up there and he helped us. Cool part of Habitat is the sweat equity. So, you know, people feel like they're contributing, and it's really awesome.
Thanks for sharing. And then there's like more here. Anyone wants to share?
My picture is the one up on the top, and it looks like it's actually an old racetrack, a horse racetrack that they developed into housing, and the racetrack itself turned into a park. And so that has developed into a community asset in the aspect that they serve free lunches in the summertime there, and it has become a community hub.
Nice. And where is this again?
In Spokane, Washington.
Wonderful. So thank you all for sharing your treasures and special places in your community and what makes it special as well. So a lot of landscapes and people, initiatives, art. So now Bob is going to be talking about the 5th asset, which is like exchange and local economy.
Okay, thank you, Avis. Next slide, please. That'd be great. All right. So the 5th asset on the list are really the resources that a community utilizes. It's the money coming into the community. It's the money coming out of the community. It's really the economics that funds it. And when we talk about an asset-based economy, we're really talking about an exchange program where goods are produced and traded. Goods are produced and sold on the outside, on the inside. And you're really moving toward the goal of producing as many things as possible inside your neighborhood and deriving a profit from that so that you can continue to create sort of a multiplier effect of how the neighborhood gets, how the neighborhood grows and thrives and, you know, becomes a healthy place to be. And through the course of this 20 minutes or so, I'll talk about some examples of that. This leaky bucket is that about 20 years ago, I went to a week-long gathering of ABCD practitioners in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, at a place called the Coady Institute. And I'll put this in the chat later. It's something that would be worthwhile for you to write down. Coady is C-O-A-D-Y Institute. And they do ABCD work all over the world. And they had this gathering, and we had a group there from Rhodesia in Africa, and they introduced us to this leaky bucket idea. And I just thought this was what a great depiction of a neighborhood economy or a community economy, and how that economy either worked or didn't work, you know. So on the top, you've got everything, all the resources, all of the economic things that you pour into your community. So it's everything from tax revenues, bartering, foundation grants, government grants, the wages of people that live there, the sale of local goods, business sales, grocery sales, tourism revenue, whatever, wherever you end up getting your money. The leaky bucket is that all those resources come in, and then they also go out. So they go out for social services, health-related expenses, transportation, recreation, all kinds of purchases of goods and things like that. And the things on the bottom, sort of the leaky bucket, in an unhealthy community, a community that's not functioning very well, is that a lot of that money can go out for negative things. It can go out for alcohol and tobacco and drugs. You know, it can go out for various forms of criminal activity, and it's funds that don't get used, you know, for the healthy building of the community itself. So when you're taking a look at your community, this can also be a way of your beginning to assess, the health of your community. So you can document all the sources of all the resources that are coming into your community, and you can document how those resources are being spent and how they're going out of the community. Next slide, Evis. So, in fact, you saw this slide before, but it's a little bit different right now, it also can be used in the exchange. You've got the individual people, the people that live in the neighborhood in the beginning. The next circle are the associations that are in that neighborhood. And then you've got the profit, not-for-profit, governmental business organizations that are on the outside. The exchange of goods between individuals, associations, and businesses goes back and forth, between the two. And that's sort of how the exchange system works. Next. So you got nonprofits, institutions, associations, and you got all kinds of financial and other forms of exchanges. You've got barter or reciprocity systems. You've got the redistribution of goods moving from one place to another. And then you got the market itself exchanging goods, selling products, bringing in revenue and that. Next. So reciprocity or barter. I want to talk a little bit more about this is that if you go back to the asset map that John was talking about earlier, and especially the sort of hand, head, and heart as you're looking at the gifts that individual people bring to a situation, you can begin to assess, how goods can be exchanged in that. So people have particular skills, they've got particular products, they've got things that they're willing to share. They can barter those things for other services that they end up needing. They can exchange those goods. A very simple process is, and it's sort of very interesting, is in the neighborhood I live in here in Connecticut, I live on a cul-de-sac, and we essentially have 7 houses on this cul-de-sac, and we have trucks. We've got all kinds of sort of, leaf blowers, lawn mowers, things like that, ladders. And we have decided that we don't all need to buy these things. So we share these things, and we're close enough as a neighborhood. We basically keep our garages open and people go in and out of those garages and use our goods. It's a sharing of material things to help other people out. We have a big snowfall like we had last week. We get done taking care of our sidewalks, and we're helping other neighbors do theirs. The next slide. So examples of this on a much bigger scale are like the Capital Area Food Bank, and which, it's a network of 200 food banks in the United States. They feed over 500,000 people a year. They distribute almost 35 million meals to kids, seniors, families in need. Banks like this grew like crazy during COVID. As you noticed, all kinds of communities started developing food banks, and the sharing of food and sharing of goods. Even wealthier and upscale communities had people unemployed and had food banks develop overnight. So in a form of sharing. The other thing that we did and that we've done is that the organization I used to work for, we had a community service program where we put young adults into situations for a year where they worked in a nonprofit agency, and they gained experience and they gained skills in giving back. I did an ABCD workshop with them every single fall to give them the whole idea of how to use their assets and gifts in those situations. But we compiled a book of their gifts, and they used that as a barter system between each other. They weren't being paid very much, and so they ended up trading all kinds of skills and services, everything from piano lessons and saxophone lessons to trading equipment, to trading skills like computer repair and all kinds of things in that. So it's a great way of using, even, doing the hand, head, and heart exercise. You can document those things and actually end up creating a directory. This particular picture shows a particular community, probably a farmer's market, where goods are exchanged and things like that. But these also might be goods that are being produced and developed in the neighborhood and shared in the neighborhood. It's funny, when I saw this slide for the first time, I couldn't, I had a hard time reading actually what was on it. And, but I think it's the whole idea of how you start up some type of community venture. And it's a case of where you can start a community economy by actually selling shares in that. And so you have shared ownership of the goods that are produced in a community. You develop community co-ops. Cooperative grocery stores became very popular in the United States, with goods that were being produced. It was sort of farm to market. But I worked in a community co-op in New Haven for several years, where I would go in, I'd put in 5 hours a week, and that allowed me to shop at the market. And all of the help there was volunteer working on this, putting in so many hours a week. And we had hundreds of members that actually ran the grocery store. And we were able to produce very healthy goods. This picture shows something like what I was talking about in my neighborhood exchange of things that we have, goods that we can share. So, and it's a blending of people who have needs. Someone needs a chiropractor. There might be a chiropractor living over here in a particular neighborhood. There are people that translate Spanish, and there might be a lot of people where English is a second language, or they don't speak English yet. And so there are people who have volunteered to be translators in that neighborhood. It's a great place in terms of the sharing of resources in a shared economy. Yeah, just fill everything in. That'd be good. So how do you make a community wealthy? How do you start moving? So the examples of what goes on in a neighborhood might be things like agriculture. There might be goods manufactured in that neighborhood. Communities like where John lives down in West Virginia, there might be mining going on, and the mining of goods that are going on there. So you've got the local economy, and this is what's produced inside the neighborhood. Some of those goods get exported outside the neighborhood, and you can bring in resources by doing that. And some of those goods are consumed inside the neighborhood. So when you start thinking about making that community healthier, you'll see out on the right sides a local bank. And there have been a number of community banks that have developed around the country. A lot of them have developed by neighborhood groups because of the actions of the larger banks, who won't lend to poor people to buy housing or to buy co-ops and things like that. And basically they're very difficult places to get funding from. So these are local banks where you can invest your money locally, and it comes back to your community or comes back to your neighborhood. We had a community bank in our neighborhood in Bridgeport where I worked for years, and it was a real resource in terms of things, bringing resources into the neighborhood itself and investing in that community. And we were able to develop things like small businesses. Entrepreneurs were able to go to that bank and get small loans and things like that to get their businesses started. And all of this, as you're moving along, begins to create some form of a multiplier effect. And And that multiplier effect, as you're developing this entrepreneurial spirit, you're developing jobs. Jobs produce more jobs as you're going along. Okay, next one. So go back to the multiplier effect, Avis. Okay, so you can see by this is that healthy communities just keep growing in this way. I have two really good examples of growing neighborhoods. One turned out to be probably one of the worst disasters in the history of the United States. We just recently we recently had the 100-year anniversary of the Tulsa, Oklahoma neighborhood, Greenwood. And the Greenwood neighborhood was a fantastic example of a Black neighborhood that decided to invest in itself, to create a neighborhood where it produced goods, sold goods, and set up a sustainable economy in their neighborhood. It got so prosperous that it was eventually called the Black Wall Street of the United States. And it was Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma. A lot of you probably know the story is that the white community in that community decided at some point we needed to get rid of this neighborhood, and they basically burned it to the ground. But that neighborhood was a perfect example of producing a local economy, investing in that neighborhood, and making and deriving wealth, for the neighborhood itself, and it created this multiplier effect as it went on. The second example I have is not in a slide, and I put a link to the place in the chat. Was the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative in Boston. The Dudley Street Initiative was fascinating to me. Jody Kretzmann, who was one of the founders of the ABCD Institute, and I did some work there 25, 30 years ago. And Jody had been involved for quite a while, and he involved me in some of that work. And I was, and what they did is they took a neighborhood that looked an awful lot like that picture that Eva showed, with empty lots and debris in the street and boarded up buildings and things like that. And they decided that they wanted to invest in their neighborhood because they had a lot of empty lots. The city of Boston was actually using one of the lots as a dumping ground for its trash. And so, they got together as a neighborhood. They got rid of the trash. They started getting people to invest in that neighborhood, and they developed hundreds and hundreds of units of housing. They developed over 130 commercial sites of businesses that went into that neighborhood. They developed large community gardens where they were producing a lot of their own goods. And the gardens were sort of interesting because the people in the neighborhood grew specialty products. So it's like one family might grow tomatoes, another might do cucumbers, another might do broccoli, and another would do lettuce. And then they would bring all those goods together, and they would sell them at their farmers markets, or they would give them away to needy families in the neighborhood and sort of help them along. In looking at the pictures, I wish I could have posted the picture that I saw. There was a wonderful mural that was done on one of the walls in the neighborhood, and that mural had pictures painted of all of the people who had made some type of an investment in that neighborhood. So there were community development specialists, but most of it was people from the neighborhood itself who invested in the neighborhood. And they had their pictures up on this wall, and there were hundreds of pictures. Along with the pictures, the Neighborhood Initiative produced a book, and the book had the stories of each of the persons that were there. And we'll talk a little bit more about the stories when I do the next piece. So this one's obvious. What if we don't invest locally? What if we have a weak economic base. You go back to the leaky bucket. And if you take a look at the leaky bucket, this leaves the neighborhood sort of wide open to negative things actually going on in the neighborhood. And so you get criminal activity. You get these neighborhoods as a place for drug selling and drug use, and a lot of the ills we end up dealing with in human service systems, they get multiplied in neighborhoods like this. And sometimes they never get out of those situations. And so the message here is the investment message. It's to go back to what we were talking about, what we talked about in the previous slides about how you build a healthy economy based on the people from the neighborhood investing their skills, investing their assets in the neighborhood, and producing sort of a healthy economy for the neighborhood. The next slide is, I always laugh when I take a look at this slide, because back in the 1970s, when Richard Nixon was president, Richard Nixon had an economic theory, which is very well depicted in this thing, is that you essentially give, and we're doing a lot of this today, unfortunately, as the rich are getting richer and richer and richer, is that all of the aid money, all of the business revenues go to the wealthiest people in our communities. And the expectation is, the economic theory is, that wealth will trickle down to the people on the bottom and everybody will thrive. Well, you know how well that's worked, right? It doesn't work. And the people on the bottom, the disparity between them and the people on the top just keeps growing and growing. And it really is what contributes to poverty and the problems we end up having. So there are two slides here about a school being in a neighborhood, and all of the different organizations in a community that a school interacts with, from banks, policemen, daycare centers, churches, religious institutions, restaurants, food service places, bakeries, social service agencies, media. There's an incredible economy that goes on back and forth here. And there are a lot of opportunities in these interactions for neighborhood folks to be the providers of resources to these schools. The schools are generally, I mean, if you've got a school in your neighborhood like this is, generally they have these giant purchasing contracts with organizations that bring in all the goods from the outside. But there are areas there where you can intervene in those exchanges that are going on and start sharing the goods that actually come out of the neighborhood. Something that I loved is, and there was a great example of this in New York City called the Beacon Schools. And I think I talked a little bit about them last week, but the Beacon Schools are schools that open early in the morning, they close late at night, and they provide an awful lot, in addition to the academics that go on during the regular school day, they provide all kinds of services and help for the people in the community. And the libraries are open to the neighborhood folks that are there. There are all kinds of people from the community who are teaching courses, you know, that head part of the hand, head, and heart. It's a lot of people sharing what they know with people in the community who can benefit from that stuff. So this slide and the next slide actually demonstrates how you can end up making those connections. Before I go on to the culture and stories part, let me stop for a second and have any of you who would like to talk a little bit about, you know, shared economics, barter systems, exchange systems, possibly in your communities, that you could share that might be a benefit to the group itself.
Well, I'll put it this way. We're in Savannah. I know that the west side of Savannah has always been a struggle. The people there have desired to be participants. They just didn't know how. They didn't go to other parts of the city. Never given them a benefit. Well, recently now, they have built an arena. So hopefully that will help stimulate and bring some economic hope to the area. My biggest thing is every time that organizations prior, pre-pandemic, they couldn't excel, they couldn't come together because somehow they were blocked. It was against certain ordinances within the city. You couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. My hope is now that people will find that hope and go ahead and start instituting just what we're talking about here. The bartering, the different, the different aspects of growth to take pride in their communities and feel like at every whim or turn that they're not being shunned or shut down. It was like, I don't know, there's something special about this city, but some of the other people on the call, you can chime in and give your perspective, but I mean, I love everything about it.
Well, I'm sure I agree. I'll just give a thumbs up.
I was gonna chime in. I've got a buddy who does herb farming. And so herb farming, you have to do it mostly with your hands. And so he sold a great deal of it at the farmers markets, and you could do a lot of it with, a small plot of land. And anyways, he exchanged oftentimes with the restaurants, not for money, but for a meal. So he would go out, we'd go out on a Tuesday night just to hang out for a little bit, and his food would show up for free. My food I would pay for, and that was just what they kind of worked out every once in a while with some of the restaurants in town. And it actually helped everybody. The restaurant, my buddy would choose the restaurant. I would have to pay for my meal. So the restaurant was selling his stuff. They were making money, and he was getting a free meal out of it as well. So it worked out pretty well.
But how does that help with community though?
I think it helps the community because the restaurant is buying local. He's a local herb farmer, and they're not going to the major stores. They're not going to Walmart to buy their herbs. So that money is starting to stay local. Plus, that business is thriving, and with that business thriving, the waitresses, hostess, the kitchen staff is all employed by people in the area. So it does help the economy. Plus, oftentimes those restaurants were locally owned restaurants. So it's a person's already invested in the community working with him. So it's all sorts of money trying to stay local as possible.
Matt, I think that's a pretty good example of, and a lot of these farm to table restaurants are practicing very similar things like that, in communities. Good processes. Do we have one more good example?
Yeah.
Oh,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. In Spokane, when COVID hit, there was a lot of small restaurants that were looking at going out of business. Well, there's an grassroots organization that before COVID hit, they gathered backpacks to give out to the homeless, and they used their resources to actually put the word out to the neighborhood to collect donations. And what they did was they went into these small local restaurants and they would purchase anywhere from 100 to 250 free meals to pass out to people to keep the money in the community. And they've 18 months later, they're still doing it. So this way it's a way of feeding people who may not be able to feed themselves. And also putting money back into the local businesses to keep them afloat as we try to navigate through COVID.
I didn't talk about it very much when I was talking about the economics part, but there are businesses and institutions in our community that can be very kind to neighborhood types of projects. I don't know how many of you have a town fair tire company in your community, that sells tires for automobiles and things like that. But here in New England, for example, Town Fair Tire is one of the most generous businesses around. You need $5,000 for something, $10,000 for something, and you've got a good idea, you can go to them. each of their local affiliates has so much money that they'll hand out just to neighborhood groups and community groups. And you can probably discover community banks and other people like that in your community who will give small amounts of resources to get people started in entrepreneurial ventures and things like that. So, so that's the economy. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and tell some stories and get some stories out of you and give you a sense of what neighborhoods are really about stories, and communities and cultures and things like that are all about stories. I was told a story a number of years ago. I was doing a workshop, actually an ABCD in juvenile and criminal justice week-long workshop in New Mexico. And I had a police chief there from Defiance, Arizona, which is in the middle of the Navajo reservation there. And he told this wonderful story that I'm going to share with you that's got pretty strong ABCD implications. So the story he told goes a little like this. A young Navajo shepherd was herding his flock in a remote pasture on a mesa when suddenly a brand new BMW advanced out of the dust cloud towards him. The driver, a young man looking a bit inappropriate for where he was in an Armani suit, Gucci shoes, Ray-Ban sunglasses, leans out of the window and asks the shepherd if he and his family would like to make a lot more money than they're making right now. He offered to help them make his business a lot more efficient. The young Navajo explained how sheep herding had been in his family for hundreds of years, and he and his family were very happy doing exactly what they were doing. After several attempts, the young sheep herder to consider his offer. In frustration, he says, well, I should get something out of this. If I can tell you exactly how many sheep you have in your flock, will you give me one? The shepherd looked at the man a bit amused and says, sure, I'll do that. So the guy in the car whips out his iPad, connects it to a cell phone. Then he surfs to a NASA page on the internet where he calls up a GPS satellite navigation system, and he opens up a database in an Excel web sheet, and he sends an email on his iPhone. And after a few minutes, he receives a response. Finally, he prints out a 100-page report on his miniaturized printer and turns to the shepherd and says, you have exactly 1,586 sheep. Well, the young shepherd, not too impressed, says, well, that's correct. So you can have one of my sheep. So he watches the young man wrap up one of his animals and put it in the back of his BMW. The shepherd then says, what if I can tell you exactly what your business is? Will you give me back my animal? Okay, why not? The young man, obviously thinking this young Navajo could never have any idea, what he does for a living, says, yeah, go ahead. Well, the young Navajo says, clearly, you're a consultant. And the guy says, how did you know that? He says, well, you turned up here, although nobody asked you to come. You wanted to get paid for an answer I already knew the answer to. And you don't know crap about my business because you wrapped up my dog. Now, think about that story. I mean, I love this story. I tell this story almost every ABCD workshop I go to because it's like we do a lot of depending on experts and people outside our community to help us gain a benefit. When in fact, we have almost everything inside our neighborhood that we need to do the job that needs to be done. One of the richest things we have in our neighborhoods are the stories of the people who live there. They're their own stories, they've developed over time, and the whole art of storytelling is one of the beautiful things that really builds community. You go to strong communities anywhere in the world, and when John McKnight and Jody Kretzman were traveling the country, What they were doing 30 years ago, 30 years plus ago, was collecting stories of where community people had banded together and helped build their community and make it a stronger place to be. And those stories were incredibly rich. You have storytellers, you're a storyteller, whether you believe it or not, your story and the fact that you're at this workshop and you want to do something about making your place where you live and where you work a healthier place to be, it is something that's, there's probably a richness in the stories that you have. Those people that I told you about on the wall at the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, every single one of them had a story, and their story was where they came from. This was a Jamaican, Dominican, Cape Verdean community, so they all had stories from where they came from and why they came and what they expected to learn and find in Boston where they would get a better life. But they used all of that. They used all of that stuff to start to give their gifts, to make their community a better place to be. So Evis, if you could show us the types of stories slide. So we have several different kinds of stories. We got stories of people's background and their personal history. We got stories of what they like to do, what they like to contribute. We've got stories of their skills and capacities and what they've been able to build in their lives. We've got stories of successful community development. The story of the Greenwood community in Tulsa was an example of that. The stories of the people who lived in Boston in the Dudley Street neighborhood are stories of that. We have stories of economic growth. How did the community grow? Who was involved in all that? We have stories of addressing racism and attempts at doing that, several stories of those. We got stories of including people who are marginalized, people who have been left out, and stories of people who tried to help them in some ways. I always love telling the story of my mom and dad that I was raised in a big family, and it was a poor family in Northern Appalachia. And I remember coming home several times, and there would be, a man or a woman sitting at our table, and my parents would be feeding them. And, they weren't dressed very well, and they could have been dirty and stuff like that. And I would ask my parents, we lived on a railroad line, and my parents told me that we had a marking on our front steps to say that if you were hungry and needed a meal, our house was a place where you could stop. I thought that stuck with me all my life and really is a story that got me into the giving back field, I think, of work. But stories like that are incredibly rich. We have stories of a time of the community is and was at its best, and is and was at its worst in how it grew to become a better place to be. We have stories of cultural traditions, stories that people bring from their homelands and where they were, and stories about the communities they were brought up in. Stories, the keys to good storytelling are they have a purpose, they've got a personal connection to something, they're relevant to the audience you're talking to. I'm talking to a lot of people here who are very interested in developing their community. I thought the Navajo story would be a good story for you to carry forward in that. Good stories include a beginning, middle, and end. They should be short, they shouldn't go on forever. John Unger here is a minister. And, being a minister, he'll tell you that if he goes over a certain amount of time in giving his homily on Sundays, people probably stop paying attention, right, John? What's the time limit, John, normally?
12 minutes.
12 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another thing to keep in mind. How long should your story be? Your story should create a picture. The person listening to it should be able to almost put themselves in the scene, put themselves in the situation that you're in, and be able to do that. The story should build a response from the audience. There should be passion in your story. What are you passionate about? What are you so excited about that people want you to stop talking at some point because they're getting tired of listening to you? A good story is told by someone who can vary their voice and vary their inflections. I don't know how many of you listen to the Moth Radio Hour, for example, but the Moth Radio Hour is just a storytelling hour. It's every Thursday night about 11 o'clock on public radio. If you're up that late, it's really worth your listening, because they're people's stories about all different kinds of situations in their life. And the other thing is to use your body or props to help tell your story. I had an art and architecture professor when I was in grad school, and he was teaching this class. And I'll tell you, he would go from the floor to jumping on his desk and then doing pirouettes, and he was using his body to tell a story and to shaping the stories as it was. So it's your turn. And rather than breaking into groups, which will take a fair amount of time, how many of you have a story? A story about why you're here, why you think this whole endeavor you're on about building a community is a good one to be on. And you've got to be shorter than 12 minutes, but hey.
I guess I'll go first.
Okay.
This is Tia Brightwell. So I'm here. I guess my story is, basically the things that I've been through as far as community goes. I know that there's much more to offer. In that I'm here because I want to help my community with the things that I've experienced in my community. Sometimes I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how to mirror it. I don't know how to get the leader, the people that's supposed to help me help my community, make it a better community for all of us. And so, seeing the ABCD training, I guess it sparked my interest to see what it is that I was missing, or words or learn techniques that I was missing to really get into my community, to be able to say, hey, I want to educate the youth. I want to empower women, and I want to engage families, so telling my story is those three things. Whether I'm educating my own children, and I'm a mother of 4.
Mm-hmm.
Is 25 years old. I have a 22-year-old, and I have a 15 and a 13-year-old. Whether it's empowering women, which I felt after getting sick in 2013 with lupus and fibromyalgia, I didn't have a community. I didn't have anybody, because everybody was saying that I was lazy. Everybody was saying that I was lying about these illnesses. And it was my community. It was the people that I went to church with. It was the people that I sung on the praise team with. It was those people that was my community. And so, and the last one was engaging families. No one knew how to support my family. My children that are now graduated from high school went through high school literally with me in a bed, sick. And so I rose. I feel like God gave me that strength to rise up, to say that there are other mothers, there are other families that need this same story or the same thing that I have on the inside of me. So that's I hope I didn't take 12 minutes.
Okay. So Tia, and all of you, in listening to Tia's story, if you went down that list of what makes a good story, she hit about 8 or 9 of those points. And one of the things is It's very personal. She was transparent, I mean, she talked about things in her life that she may not have been as proud of at some point in time. She puts you in the scene, where she was. The way she used her voice, she's obviously passionate about what she's doing right now. She told you how you got there. I think we have time for one more, and then we'll move on to the next segment.
If I may, this is Saeed here. I didn't raise my hand, so sorry if I'm butting in.
Saeed, go ahead.
Sure. So picking up on what Catherine has put in the chat, I want to acknowledge kind of like the youth and young adult leadership community here in Philadelphia. So about 5 years ago, I had the pleasure of being hired on in my work as kind of like a youth coordinator and program manager for a youth mental health awareness program. And much of what we focused on was advocacy, leadership development, relational skill building, public speaking, and some policy work. And it was it continues to be a healthy journey. One of the earlier challenges we experienced was young people being open enough to give the feedback that hey, we deserve compensation for the level of insight that we're providing. If system partners, if older individuals with lived experience are being compensated, then it's like we're worthwhile too. And so over the years, that conversation has constantly come forth where it's just like, hey, we're deserving of more entitlements, more supports, more resources, and more dignifying access to what goes into kind of like sponsoring people to affect change in any community. And our young people, a lot of them, I was helping personally, financially, and anywhere from getting milk for folks, transportation, anything you could think of, rent, all that good stuff. And then some very real conversations came forth, and that it's like, hey, Shahid, you don't have to break yourself to support us. It's like, create opportunities where we can experience, taking care of ourselves. It's cool that you want to be the brother, the uncle type, and all those things. That doesn't take the place of us having our own and being able to manage our own, as well as standing up and being these leaders. You got to believe full circle that we can take care and do for ourselves. And it's a conversation I felt confident and welcome to bring up to my leadership, which is Kat on the call. And we were able to sit down and really think through with our community around what's the most provocative, creative option we can think of to create sustainable income for our youth and young adult leaders doing this amazing work. And so we thought through creating fellowships for folks where they would be independent contractors, receive funds. It's a part-time thing, 20 hours at $20 an hour. And sorry for the feedback there. And it became very, very liberating work. And people were able to stick with things. We didn't have to compete. They didn't have to compete in their time with like working in retail or somewhere else. Not that I'm knocking any of those things. But there's real change work and cerebral work that they were good at, that they wanted to stick with. And we were able to listen to them and create kind of like the shifts that work for them. And so that's kind of like my story of community.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll take one more. Shahid, very nice. Jennifer, how about your story about the Westboro Baptist Church?
Yeah, so I grew up in Topeka, Kansas, which I grew up thinking that it was totally normal to have people that would protest funerals that lived in your city. I just thought that was a thing that every single city in the world had, that was like a day-to-day thing. And then, it very quickly became obvious that was not the case. So there was just a lot of there was a lot of hatred and a lot of animosity and just ill will among the different groups in that community. And I'm not in the LGBTQIA plus community myself, but I'm an ally, and so even as a young kid, I really felt that was an important part of who I am. And it was just hard for me to like live in that community. And then I found the local theater community, which would hold like benefits for the local AIDS project. They would, they really like welcomed. I think especially like the kids from the LGBTQIA community in with open arms, and a lot of the kids that I worked with, their families didn't accept who they were, like they didn't accept that part of them, and so it was really important for them to have a place where they could go, where it wasn't just about like being accepted, it was about being celebrated for who they were, and so that's really shaped the way that I think about community. Is that like I think that places like that theater can completely change the way that a person lives, or if they survive something like that. And so really supporting those kinds of organizations and associations that can help build the communities that way.
Okay. I could sit here and probably listen to every single one of you for hours. I love this part of community building. We have spent nights in neighborhoods where we've just had people tell stories. It's a way of bringing people together. It's a way of building relationships and, building common interest among people. It's such a powerful tool. When I take a look at the 6 tools that we've laid out to you, individuals, institutions, associations, the economy, places, storytelling is always the most powerful piece to me. So I'll leave you with that. And maybe we'll get to do a little bit more of this over the next 2 weeks. So, John, I think it's all yours.
Well, Bob, before I go into launching mine, I think we're going to take a short break. But before we do that, just want to mention the power of story. When I first started with ABCD, and Bob, you've been there a lot longer than I have, but correct me if I'm wrong. When I first got there, we talked about 5 assets, and story was not.
That's right. Really story was not one of them.
And John McKnight just kind of came around, and then the 6th one was added. And I think one thing about this, the story is really integrated into all those assets.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it was hidden, because in all the other 5 prior to it, all story. And Joseph Campbell, if you've not read or seen, he has a good interview called The Power of Myth.
Oh, yes.
With Bill Moyers years and years ago. And he talks about the myth or the stories and how we live into our stories. We think that our stories tell our lives. Actually, our lives are defined by our stories of what we tell ourselves, and we live into those stories. And so the power of story is so critical. And also the other one that he mentioned, the local economy. If you read anything, one thing they use it as also social capital. Robert Putnam does a lot on that area. That if you want, he's written a book called Bowling Alone, as well as Our Kids, and that can give you some more background on that. But before we get into asset base or asset mapping, why don't we take a Eva's 5-minute break? 5-minute break.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's now 2:04. It's whatever. It's 48. Let's now
53.
53. Let's come back at 53. Okay.
Okay. There's a real irony, John, and you're mentioning the John and Jody and the story piece, of it not being a separate item because ABCD developed out of stories.
Yeah, I think that's why they didn't define it as a special category, because all the other categories are related. But I think they got a lot of pressure. As I was there, people would debate it, we would debate it, and finally, I think they just went on and added it. Yeah. At least from what I remember, it's been a while.
Yeah, nice, very nice. Hey, 5-minute break.
All right.
Pee break.
Okay. I think the 5 minutes went pretty fast, so we'll all come back if we can. And Evis, I know you private messaged me to speed things up. If you could just speak up, because I don't get to look at the private message if I'm starting to go over time here. So let's go ahead and talk about asset mapping. Let's see. Okay. Are you all able to see that? Let's see if I can. Thumbs up, anybody, everybody? Okay, good deal. I can't, because I have the screen up, I can't see everyone. Okay, so we talked, I put in the chat box a document that talks about creating asset mapping with Google Maps. Lets you map your community assets. It's a tool that you can utilize. So take a look at that and see if that's something you might be interested in utilizing in your context, in your situation. So we talked about the six aspects of ABCD: the individual gifts, associations, institutions, physical assets, local economy or social capital, if I call it, and then culture, stories, and history. And that's so critical, those concepts. And now we want to try to look at how do we bring it all together, okay? And look at it from an aspect from our community or our congregation or whatever group we're working on. So there are 4 primary questions that you have when you're doing asset mapping. And the first one that you start with all the time is, what can community members do by themselves? In essence, okay, the glass is half full. What is it that we have? What are the assets we have? What can we do right now? Where can we bring together and piece it together? How often we are in this mindset of a deficit mindset that, oh, only if the governor could give us $1 million, we could. Only if Congress would appropriate this money, we could. Only if this foundation would give us a grant, we could. What you want to do is look at, well, what do we have to get started? If there's a need, what can we do? What can we do as a community? So that's the first question. Once you exhaust that, the next one is, what can they do with some help from outside institutions? Okay, and what are those institutions? And what is it that they need? What they need to ask for so where are the missing pieces in order to complete it? Now, that doesn't mean you can't get started and build a momentum, but to complete it. The third is, what can only be done by outside institutions? And the fourth is, what should institutions stop doing? You know, sometimes you ever heard of toxic charity, where there's a term, particularly in the ministry world, toxic charity is where you actually create dependencies. And I'll give you an example. I'd worked over in Iraq after the first Gulf War, in southern Turkey and northern Iraq with the Kurdish refugees. And there was a gentleman by the name of Fred Cooney, who actually was called the master of disaster. And he came in, particularly with the Kurds, as they were relocating to northern Iraq. And one of the things he taught me in this is that, you know, all these international organizations like Save the Children, Medicine Sans Frontier, World Relief, World Vision, United Nations, all these people flew all these supplies in. And one of these things he said is that what would happen is that their economy would start depending on that, and you would run out local businesses. So instead of someone going down to the hardware shop and buying a shovel, they'd have 100 shovels that was flown in from overseas of some sort. And the same thing happens when we deal with floods in our own country or disasters, where it just decimates the local economy. And then after everybody leaves, the disaster's over, they leave the whole economy. What should institutions stop doing that could have long-term negative effects? So these are things that when we work with a community, we need to keep in mind. So of course, the primary purpose of an asset mapping is to reveal, discover, or uncover really the strengths that are already there. Those that are active that we can see, and those are hidden or kind of are dormant, okay? Especially with our residents. I love the story earlier on talking about, our asset is our young people, our children, and looking at that aspect that many times that's hidden, is that we don't see them as assets necessarily. Also, it has to develop a sense of empowerment, building community pride. When they do it themselves, this builds up agency, and then that pride then translates into more participation, and it's really priming it and driving it. Also, real data, in order for to imagine action. So looking at real data and looking at the action that comes from it and the results, measuring what you're doing. Instead of doing anecdotal evidence of stories, that is great. Those are part of it, but also really having some concrete measurements as far as how things are proceeding. And this would also guide relationship building that will go beyond just that particular project or that particular initiative. It really looks at sustainability, building community power over the long term that actually can accomplish or focus on anything that community will face or be addressing later. So here are some tips and cautions before we go into it. So you want to use asset lenses through growing resident power and building relationships. So looking through this as everything we do as ABCD connectors or practitioners is asset lenses of growing power, empowering people, and building relationships. So if you just look at action steps and just say action steps and it'll never get done. It has to be you got to look at the big picture and keep people, again, their eyes on the prize. What is it that we are collectively moving together? And so also, who's doing the mapping? This is important. It's important in the sense that they don't become dependent on us as ABCD practitioners or connectors, that we don't do it. The idea is you want residents to do it and actually do it themselves. The same thing as when I'm in coaching for recovery coaching and so forth. Again, the person in recovery is doing the recovery. I'm walking with the person. I'm not going to be able to do it for them or do it to them, but I can do it with them, but ultimately let them do the mapping, let them have control of the process, let them build up that agency of control of their own community. And I think last Saturday I talked about, the pothole and the idea of the person talking with the superintendent and getting that pothole fixed. No one has a right way. So the idea is be open to other types of approaches, even if you think that that's not the most effective or efficient way of approaching it. Let people wrestle with this. Wrestling with this and even failing, there's an African proverb that we learn more from our failures than we do our successes. Okay, that let people wrestle with these issues. Also, you can facilitate, convene, facilitate, and support, but ultimately the project is going to be inspired by the residents and need to be controlled by it. By having instructions and kind of developing boundaries and things like that brought up by the community can keep people on task and keep them focused. Once again, the one-on-one conversations are critical. Even once you're up and running, don't forget to continue doing the one-on-ones. Sometimes we'll get, okay, we start off with one-on-ones. Now we're going to do massive amount because we can get more done. Continue those one-on-one connectors and conversations, because that's really what develops sustainable relationships, and therefore the project will become more sustainable in the long term. So here's kind of an overview of what we're looking at in the area of a neighborhood or community asset map. So you can see those 6 quadrants or 6 areas that we talked about with ABCD: individual gifts, associations, the idea of institutions, physical assets, local economy, culture, and stories. And you start with that, and then look at each of those blocks afterwards. With the individuals, you'll see gifts, skills, youth, different, so as you're building out, this is the kind of thing you would break down. And so that's kind of an overview. That's in your notes. Someone's unmuted there.
If everyone could mute, please.
Yeah, okay. All right. And so look at that snapshot, and this is where you want to bring in either your own congregation, your own community, your own organization, even your family, whatever group that you're working with. Go through this we'll show you how to do this exercise. So again, you can see the center part is identifying assets, and in each of those quadrants, building out from there. Okay, of really asking those questions we talked about with the one-on-one, and building those out, that actually, the more you populate it, the more it stimulates more thought, and the deeper and the deeper and deeper that people actually, you'll find people will start really going deeper and deeper in each of these quadrants, and you'll see how this thing just kind of grows. So what we want to do is we want to give you an opportunity in your group. So some of you have come together as a group. Some are, individual, but we want to put you in like with another church or a group like that to kind of exercise this, to really look at starting to work on asset mapping. And asset mapping, you can talk about it all day, you can read about it, but it comes down to the fact until you do it, you won't fully be able to understand it. And so we want to get you started, because we're going to be working the next 2 other Saturdays on building this out, honing your skills in this area. But to get you started, we want you to fill out an asset categories for your neighborhood, where you live, okay, where you serve. And then by using the document, Evis will provide, for
It's on the
example,
chat.
what's
right
that?
now. It's in the chat.
It's in the chat? Okay.
Yeah,
And
and I
so
will
we-
open the rooms in a minute. And,
Yeah, so we're going to open the rooms, and what would the time be, Evis, that we would give them to start working on that document together?
well, it could be 12 minutes or 15 minutes, but I don't think that less than 12 would be possible.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and let's go ahead and give 12 minutes. If we start right now, that'll take us pretty good, and then we'll come out and we'll report out, and we'll share with each other what we came up with. Okay, so really try to dig deep in asking those questions to each other, populating those categories, and then we'll come out and we'll share with each other. Okay, any questions before we go in? College of Art and Design, and
Oh, how could we leave out SCAD?
yeah, SCAD. I mean,
SCAD.
that was, to me, that was very impressive, the work that they had been doing in the community, and of course the students and things like that.
It was kind of put in there with the arts.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
maybe that was what it was mentioned.
That's true. Although I wasn't thinking of them depending on which community you talk to, you get different ideas about SCADs.
Oh, I see.
Benefit being beneficial or not. So maybe that's why it didn't come up.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You got to be careful and culturally sensitive, but the students there, of course, bring a lot of energy, creativity, innovation, and things like that that could help as well. Good. All right. Great. That's a good start. How about another group?
I was in one of the nonprofit groups, and someone mentioned how it can be like difficult, or you don't really know where to start when you're looking for other organizations or groups that you want to like network with. And I definitely have felt the same way. Like, especially, I only moved to my county a year ago, so I'm constantly like looking for new connections and stuff. And something I just wanted to throw out there that helped me was just looking at community calendars and going to like any kind of public meeting. Like, I've been sitting on like housing commission meetings, and like we have like a racial social equity Facebook group, and they have like monthly meetings. And so just trying to like integrate myself in all of these spots, because more often than not, there are other groups that are looking for, lack of a better term, a hole to fill. And oftentimes like there's another group that's like, oh, well, let's combine our resources. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, Elizabeth, that's really good. And that's great. I mean, that's exactly as what we ought to do. One of the things that I found going into a community is reading their local newspaper. Before I go in, I will go online or try to get their local newspaper to look at the different organizations, different things that are happening in their community. The other one's, of course, the Chamber of Commerce is a good place to start. And you just start with one, and then you ask them, hey, who else in this community are doing things, or who do you partner with? You get 3 more, you go to them, you ask the same question, and you start building out this inventory, and you have others helping you build out too. But the local newspaper, newsletters, as you mentioned, just to see what is going on and who's talking about what. You can get a flavor if you read those things, over a week or so, you can see kind of a theme going on. Good. Other groups. How about the higher education group? We haven't heard from them yet. And I think there were 2 of them, right?
Yeah, 2 for university.
Yeah, the university one.
Yeah, we can share ours. I hesitated to sort of jump in because we were working collaboratively on the document. I don't have it in front of me, but I know that some of the things that we talked about for the individuals were like the people who work at the university. So we had the president, and then we had like the department heads, who all kind of have their own special interests, who could be a real asset. And then we had the Council of Elders, which is a group that I work with personally at DePaul through my work with the Egan office. So that's both a group of individuals who have a background in community development and community activism in the city of Chicago. So it's both individuals and then an association, and they all have connections kind of throughout the community that can find good spaces for us to meet and good projects for us to sort of align with. And then we talked about our aldermen, especially in a place like Chicago, where each neighborhood and each sort of ward has its own leadership. That's a really good ally to make in the community. And then we talked about so in the case of DePaul, we have extension priests who are on the property, and so they've been a real asset to us as far as providing us with like ideas and connections and real support in the work that we do.
Good, yeah. And alumni, they're the alumni?
Oh yeah, I think we missed that.
Yeah, they're a great resource. They could be a resource in many, many ways, because they've gone off and they're in different careers and jobs and professions and geographical connections, as well as financial So yeah, but those are types of things you start there, and once again you build out. Now DePaul, the institution has a very rich history, and so your story, people haven't gotten into the stories yet in the history, but those are good things to also kind of tap into to see about that as well. Good.
I have a thought on this mapping. It just occurred to me that as I'm looking at my mapping attempts, I'm thinking, wow, I wish I had, and I'm doing mine on paper, 2 different color pens, which Google makes this really easy to do 2 different colors. But when mapping, to put, people that are already working together or on board or have been contacted, especially if there's a specific project that somebody is working towards with the ABCD, have one color for who's been contacted and maybe a different color of text for people who haven't yet, who are potential. So I don't know, color coding, call me a nerd, but I'm done. Thanks.
Absolutely. And you make it look that way, and people can take a visual of it and look at it. I know when we go to ABCD meetings, who is it, Evis, and Bob, that always does the drawings for us as we're talking, and then it just puts these flip charts up, and it kind of
April Donner.
April, yeah, April. She does this beautiful kind of like collage of different, and it almost like captures all of our conversation in a visual sense, and it brings it to life. You can look at it and just get it, of what you talked about, and that's a great talent. So yeah, definitely different colors, things like that would help you.
She also does caricatures of the participants.
Okay, well, so we get the idea. I want to actually turn over to Evis to do a case study, but I'll just finish up on this.
I didn't get into my group, but I wanted to say something important about.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that ABCD is part of a triumvirate with the Egan office and the Stain Center, and they work together collectively in terms of extensive community development. Nicole, who's here, is one of the Staines Fellows, and she can speak more to that. But the College of Professional Studies will create a program for anyone who's interested and does extensive community outreach. The mission of DePaul is to heal the healers and teach the teachers. And that principle reflects in all the departments in terms of engagement with the outside. I'm a product of the University of Chicago and have taught at Loyola, but the experience of DePaul and the Stain Center and ABCD and the Egan office really makes a very powerful commitment to community engagement, and I think might be a possible map of how we talk about asset mapping.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, what a
Hello, I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear what she was saying because the sound was a little off. She said the Stain Center at DePaul University of Chicago.
Yes.
I wasn't sure.
STEANS.
Yeah, and the mission itself is heal the healers and teach the teachers. And just that the aspect of that tradition, that history, that narrative is an asset. And yeah, the Stain Center is an institution that embodies that and really is the application of that into the community and throughout the world. Yeah, good. All right, so this is wonderful. I think you all definitely get it. Let me see here. Trying to get it so I can see it. Okay, so so anyhow, this is something for you all to work on. Go walk around your specific area. Make notes of different assets that you didn't notice before. You notice how Eva's showed a before picture and the after picture of an area, and you all really kind of honed in to the wall that could have a mural and just different assets of it. Take a look in your own community, things like that. and look at it from a comprehensive as possible. Now, it can be overwhelming when you first start, as we looked at, where do we start type of thing. Where do we start? Well, it's like, the old analogy, the way you eat an elephant is you take a bite at a time. Just got to slowly continue to build on it. Also, reflect on this activity and then you can, report out to your groups and so forth as you do it. Anyhow, I will now turn it over to Eva so that she can possibly do a little case study with us before we conclude. You're muted, Evis.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. So there's here like a little exercise. So we'll have like 10 minutes to work on this. But basically, because you're already kind of like in your own group, maybe you already have like a sort of project that you like to work on. But this is kind of like, so you see that there's a lot of like requests for proposals that are asking about asset mapping. So this one, for instance, it's actually the city requesting like to create like a plan for people that are like being displaced in the community, or there's like gentrification. So here, for the perspective, we're saying that you are like a community engaged center, kind of like part of like university, but also churches and nonprofits, and you would like to respond to this like call. And the thing that you like to do is to highlight what's the importance of this like of keeping, right, the people there, but also the rich cultural history and the assets, like, and when there's gentrification, there's a lot of like businesses that close, and people that are community leaders are important, that have to are forced to move away. So basically it's just like thinking about how you might respond to these, thinking about assets. And then, so I already put you like in some groups, and there's like 7 groups. I might have to add one more. But what I want you to do is that, instead of thinking about these case stories, because you have so little time, you might want to think about some project that you're like working on, especially if you're already in a group and you are ready to respond to a request for proposals, to think about it from the asset-based perspective. So what you can do is kind of like ignore these case stories and do your own thing. And then there's like a second case story here. So assuming again that you don't have something specific that you will work on, this one is just like thinking, and these are like real call for proposals for cities. So this seaside cities, actually, Chicago has like a call for revitalizing corridors, right, and business development. And there's like a little bit of a perspective there that you are in a corridor that has like restaurants and arts and culture, and people need affordable housing, and there's a lot of like nonprofits and churches and health services and things like that. So what in this call, what they're asking for is like how you can leverage the local assets, capacities, and institutions to strengthen and contribute to community. So again, part of this, like we see a lot of like calls for this. So how can you build on the strengths of communities? So I'm gonna like just stop sharing here. And so basically you can choose one of these case studies, or you can say, hey, I'm applying for this grant and this is kind of like what I need. And then you can type some notes about that and help each other. So we will have just like 10 minutes to do that. So hopefully that's not that unclear as instructions. And again, just we have like some flexibility. So I'm gonna just to open the rooms because you will be working exactly with the same people. And let me see if I can help Reverend Novik. So you want to go to university? And I did send you to that to university. And then we have here Mike. You are in nonprofit number 2. I think that he's frozen, or that maybe that's a picture. And Patricia, I think that we're having the same problem as before.
Yeah, I think that's Reverend Novick. I think she has 2 different windows open, and that's why you have the major feedback.
Oh, but
is that not her? Is it the same person that you just sent in the university? And her first name's Patricia.
Yeah.
So what's happening is she has somehow on her system, she has 2 different windows open at the Zoom, and it's creating feedback every time she talks. It just, because it's bouncing off of each other. And that's why she has this window open. And
okay, gotcha. I think that might have the same issue.
So if what if we put this one in the waiting room? Because I don't even think she probably knows that it's open. Okay, so
waiting room, admit.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but
I did admit. Oh, that because you put her in the waiting room.
well, if she's in the waiting room, therefore won't feed back. And I believe it's the same person. Where she has Reverend Novick DePaul.
Yeah.
And then this is Patricia Novick. I think somehow she's gotten. Yeah.
I guess I put her in waiting room, but hopefully that's not a.
Hopefully I'm not. If it's somebody, but they haven't responded since we talked to them. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
And if it was the case in a particular community, I just gave it off as something that I was a little familiar with.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you. So we only have like 4 more minutes, and John is going to do like a closing here. And then, as always, we appreciate your comments. So John?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone. Kat, you mentioned in the chat that to share your asset map. Could you bring that next Saturday? And if you would be willing to share to show us that. And if anyone else has an asset map, that'll be good also to share with each other what you're working on. Keep in mind, I know things are work in progress. So today is reflection of takeaways. What I'd like for you to do, if you could, go in one of those squares and what are you taking away from our time together today? So if you could just grab a square and write your thoughts in there. Someone wrote the value of asset mapping. Just take a few minutes to do that. Looks like someone liked the elephant story.
One bite at a time, John.
Yep, that applies to so many things. Exactly. How things build individuals, associations, Asset document for community members. Asset mapping takes some digging. Absolutely. It's like an archaeological dig many times. Do no harm discussion. Provides a format for participants to share the file. Community. Importance of storytelling and the skills that goes into it. Absolutely. Building a process my community can easily participate in. Yep, keep it simple, right? The KISS method, keep it simple. Reminder on how to consider building local economy. Who else you may know that can contribute? Yeah, the other. Children can be an asset, children and youth. Seeking other people's assets. What can we do with our communities? Absolutely. Looking at with. Okay. Oh, someone likes the Horton. Horton Here's the Who. Yeah, that's always a good one. If you ever want to really kind of get people in the mindset, just read some passages from that inspires people to show their contribution matters. Great to learn from others' experience and stories. Yeah, that's important. That's why I asked Kat if she'd be willing to share the Phillies asset map.
John, we could do an icebreaker on telling your favorite children's story.
There you go. So bring that along next Saturday.
The Giving Tree.
Yeah. All right. Well, good. Okay. So, all right. So that's great. Anyhow, this is kind of wraps it up, and I don't know if I'll give Evis or Bob an opportunity to say some, but I got to say that you are a fantastic group. It's pretty big. This is one of the largest ones that we've been able to deal with on Zoom. Now, if we were in person, things wouldn't be so have logistical difficulty. But anyhow, we're gonna next week we're gonna really dig even deeper. Just think of this as an archaeological dig, right? We started off at the top, got topsoil down. We're going dig deeper and deeper. And next week, we'll even go deeper in it. So bring your asset maps and let's talk about it next Saturday. Bob, Evis, you want to say anything? Closing?
I guess I wanted to ask a question just for next week. Did you like to work on your own groups, or you like maybe like a combination of like you interact with different people and then your same groups type of thing?
Good question. I want to echo.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I just want to echo. I just want to echo what John said. We were chatting in the break about what a great group you were, that the interaction, the energy has been very, very high. There doesn't seem to be a question that just goes out there and falls off a ledge, because no one's really engaged. So we just want to thank you and looking forward to the next 2 weeks with you.
Thank you so much. See you next week.
Yeah.
Thank
See you next
you.
time, everybody. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Leave.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
You.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Darlene, I love your colors. Or Chanel, I love your colors.